If historical connection and indigeneity alone trumps whatever people are already there, then all modern borders... It does not trump other people.
It just trumps what you're saying. I'm saying it trumps the idea that we're colonizers and foreign people. ICE agents right now are currently being trained by the IOF on the tactics to use against civilian populations. They might have different uniforms, but the ideology is exactly the same.
We always talk about the two solutions, one-state solution to, but most of the Israelis, they're looking for a third solution.
Which is?
Ethnic cleansing.
I don't support
getting
that
everyone
solution.
out of here. That's what they want to do.
It's been more than 2 years since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, killing over 1,200 innocent people and taking hundreds of hostages. The war that followed has devastated Gaza, killing over 70,000 Palestinians. Peace now rests on a ceasefire that many believe will not hold. So where do we go from here? From Jubilee Media, this is Surrounded, where one brave soul faces a room full of disagreeers. I'm your host, John Regalado, and today we are facing the divide head on. I'm here in the center with our featured guest, Rudy. How are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here. Are you ready to jump into the debates?
Always ready.
All right. Debaters, are we ready to begin? Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
I'm Rudy Rochman. I'm a Jewish and Israel rights activist, and today I'm surrounded by 20 pro-Palestinian activists who completely disagree with me. My first surrounded claim is that Israel is not committing apartheid or genocide.
All right, if you would like to be the first debater, please get to the chair in 3, 2, 1.
How's it going? Good, how are you?
So, before I start, I want to lay some groundwork. I want to start with a working definition of genocide, some legal and historical examples, and then I want to demonstrate Israel's intent, their policies of genocide, and then the results. So in terms of a working definition of genocide, it would be to destroy, with the intent to destroy a group in whole or in part. Some historical legal analogies that I think are analogous to the case of Gaza is the case in Bosnia, where the Bosnian Serb army killed 8,000 men and boys. This was ruled to be a genocide by the ICJ. Another 30,000 women and children were forced to flee. This was done so to facilitate an ethnic cleansing. So murder under the laws of war to motivate a population to be ethnically cleansed. In terms of Israel's intent, Benjamin Netanyahu said it plainly and clearly last year under testimony with the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Knesset. He said, we're destroying more and more houses. Sooner or later, they'll have nothing to go back to. Our problem right now is just finding a country that's going to take the Palestinian refugees. So they're murdering Palestinians in Gaza en masse to attempt to bring about the demise of the Gaza population, create conditions unfit for human existence by decimating civilian infrastructure, et cetera. Now, in terms of a policy, we can look to the Where's Daddy program that's being used by Israeli intelligence through a Lavender AI system where they spot what they suspect to be low-level Hamas operatives, bomb them when they're at home with their family. So you can't claim Hamas is using Palestinians as human shields when most of what Israel is actually doing is targeting who they suspect to be low-level Hamas operatives when they're with their family. This is backed up by the demographic data. Reuters pointed to the fact that over 1,300 families' bloodlines have been wiped out in Gaza. Sometimes as much as 4 generations of Palestinian families are being wiped out, sometimes as large as 14 members of a Palestinian family is being wiped out. So again, we have policy, and then we look to the effects. 65 doctors wrote in the New York Times in a guest opinion essay, doctors that are observing in Gaza, they're participating, they're volunteering in Gaza. We don't have international journalists in Gaza, so the extent to which our international testimonies are often from these doctors, paramedics, and nurses. What they described...
So let me answer.
Sure.
You said a lot of things.
Yeah,
right?
sure, go for it.
So first of all, I'm against the murder of any individual person living in Gaza. I see Palestinians as my family, as my cousins. If I see another individual who's, let's say, from America or a Palestinian, I will automatically feel more connected to a Palestinian. We have mostly the same ancestry. We're connected to the same land, and our descendants will be eternally connected to one another. So whenever I see a Palestinian innocent life taken, that is a horrible tragedy. But you got something wrong from the very beginning. That genocide is the intent to eliminate a population. Now, you might not be successful. So they were were not successful in many cases with Nazi Germany, with the Armenians, but it was the intent to try to eliminate the population. Now,
so can I ask you then?
Let me.
Do you think that the Bosnian Serb army did not commit genocide in Serbia?
I think if the intent was to eliminate the entire population, then it would be a genocide. If the intent is to kill a lot of people in order to do ethnic cleansing, which is another thing, which is also problematic. Okay, but
so you're saying it's ethnic cleansing, not genocide.
No, I'm not saying what's going on is ethnic cleansing. I'm saying that there are individual politicians who support the idea of removing Palestinians.
I'm not talking about individual politicians. I'm talking about Benjamin Netanyahu,
which would be ethnic cleansing, and I'm against that.
And you agree that the quote I cited earlier would be the intent for ethnic cleansing, right?
The way that you sourced it would be, but I don't think that that's actually what he said.
That's from Times of Israel.
We should fact check it and see the whole entire context.
Okay, yeah, fact check it.
If we find
Times of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu quote.
If we find that Bibi Netanyahu has the intent to remove all the Palestinians from Gaza, I am against it.
And you would say that's ethnic cleansing?
That would be ethnic cleansing.
Okay, great. So we can source that. Amazing.
Now that we're agreeing that there's a difference between ethnic cleansing and genocide, and that I'm against both, let's talk about the claim of it being genocide. Now, when we look at 2.2 million people living in Gaza, and max number is 70,000 by Hamas records, which we know Hamas is constantly lying of how many people are dying. For 70,000 people to have died, also this is in the past 2 years, there are 5,000 people who are dying from natural causes every year, which is also included. The Hamas number...
The natural causes are not included. That's false. If natural causes were included, you would see excess death among youth and among elderly. You don't see that with the demographic data. The demographic data is actually directly from Israeli airstrikes.
No, it's directly from Hamas.
It's the Gaza Ministry of Health, which has been reliable.
Which is Hamas.
Okay, they've been reliable in every other armed
that
conflict.
Seeks to kill civilians is giving you your information.
Let me ask you this. Why doesn't the Israeli military, if the Israeli military was operating under the laws of war, they would know how many Palestinian civilians have died. Why don't they
being killed? Only 70,000 to the max number. That is a small amount of people and very clearly not a genocide.
Rudy, we've got flags up. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Hello.
Salam.
Shalom.
How are you?
Comment allez-vous?
Très bien.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Manish Macha.
Baruch Hashem. How are you? Alhamdulillah.
Very good. For a moment, I wanted to believe that you really wanted peace. For a moment, I really almost believed that you wanted the Palestinians to go back to Palestine. But then when you ridiculed and you belittled 70,000 deaths, and you're saying that's just a small percentage for 1.2 million, that is outrageous.
That is not what I said.
That's what I've heard you saying.
No, what I said is it's not a genocide, because if it was a genocide, we'd see the intent and the actual murder of a lot of people. And I started with one person dying. That's Palestinian is horrible. Okay? Right. So remember everything that I said. Palestinians are my family. If any Palestinian dies, that's horrible.
See,
but if
what we are seeing right now, what we're seeing right now is, and I hope I'm wrong, is a great act. Sadly, we've seen the president and Benjamin Netanyahu going out and saying we have to buy social media, we have to influence influencers, we have to work on the young Americans and young Westerners so we can win the battle of the public opinion. Unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing right now. You having this soft attitude while serving in the Israeli army while people were getting killed. Mm-hmm. I'm a Palestinian. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm a Semite. I'm not anti-Jewish. I have so many Jewish friends. But as long as it's legal, I'm going to go out and say every day I'm anti-Zionism because I'm anti-apartheid, anti-genocide, anti-ethnic cleansing. You know, the people here are labeled today as pro-Palestinians, as if it's something it's given. We're not just pro-Palestinian because Palestinians, we're pro-equality, justice, we're anti-racism. If Jewish people are going through the same, we will be pro-Jewish people as well. Mm-hmm. Trust me.
So do you condemn the attacks of Jews all around the world, including by Palestinians?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Any innocent person that's been attacked without a justified reason, my faith tells me I have to condemn it.
What is a justified reason?
If they're not trying to kill you, if they're not trying to fight you.
If a Palestinian blows up a bus, is that justified?
You cannot put this out of context. I'm just asking
because you said justified.
Absolutely. No, when I say when you served in the army.
Yeah, but can you answer that real quick?
Absolutely, I can answer that.
Can you condemn that?
Absolutely, I'm telling you, I condemn the killing of any innocent soul. That's my faith is telling me to do.
Thank you.
All right? So now when you are trying to say that I am trying to promote peace and justice, why don't you join a movement like Breaking the Silence? Mm-hmm. Have you heard about them?
Of course I heard about them.
So why don't you join them? Please
So Breaking the Silence is an organization that takes some truths, adds on a lot of lies, and does everything in order to be tokens as Jews and as former soldiers who get paid by foreign entities. Well, there's a new movement of people who aren't the tokens on either side. There's individual Palestinians who are tokens as well, who will sell whatever the Israeli government wants. Of individuals who are proud and who are strong and who want to see a future where there are people coming together. You said
Rudy,
you're not an
there's a big
anti-Semite,
difference
but you're an
between-
anti-Zionist. But does that mean that you're against the idea that people have a right to live in this land?
I'm against the idea of what Zionism is doing.
No,
what
so Zionism is an idea.
You know who else?
I'm asking, are you against the idea that the Jewish people have a right to self-determine on their ancestral homeland?
I don't. You know who else did not have that problem?
That?
I don't. I just told you.
Okay,
you know
great,
who
so
else?
You're not an anti-Zionist.
You know
you're
who
an
else?
Anti the current conflict and everything that happened.
You know who else did not have a problem with Jewish people coming to Palestine?
A lot of Palestinians.
A lot of Palestinians.
Amazing.
They opened their doors.
And I don't
they
have a
opened their
problem with
homes.
Palestinians
Look
being
it
able
up.
to come home.
Mohammad Hadid, the father of Bella and Gigi Hadid. What is his story? His family opened their doors, their homes for a Jewish family, only to come back and say, you know what, this is our house now. You cannot come back again.
You won't see me condemning Palestinians as a whole. You won't see me trying to delegitimize or to demonize Palestinians.
You keep calling it Yehuda and Samar. You don't even call it Palestine.
Historically, that region is Judean
The way
Samara.
Palestinians were kicked out of their homes. The way a
Palestinians
genocide.
and Jews were kicked out.
The way a
This is something
genocide
we need to
happened in
both
Deir
condemn.
Yassin. Do you know what Deir Yassin is?
Yes, of course I know.
You know what happened in Deir Yassin?
I know what
That's a
happened in Deir Yassin.
genocide.
A genocide would be the intent, okay, for a population to eliminate another
That's what
population.
happened.
Rudy,
What you had in 1948
Rudy,
is a
we wanna
conflict
hear-
between two peoples where people got kicked out on both sides,
Rudy,
and I'm
we-
against that.
We also want to hear from him.
Of course.
So you know the problem with the claim that Palestinians left by themselves, they fled.
I didn't make that claim.
That's ridiculous. When
didn't make
people
that
say
claim.
that, you know what, the government that you're supporting, the
I'm not
army that you're
supporting the government.
defending, that is what they're saying. They're saying Palestinians left by themselves.
Some people say that. Some people don't say that.
Oh, believe me, that a lot of people are saying
Yeah,
that.
there are Palestinians who chose to leave, and there are many Palestinians that were forcibly displaced. There's more nuance we need to add to the conversation. But there are also many Jewish villages that were displaced as well.
That's not what happened.
That is what happened. Why were there no more Jews in
the
Jerusalem
Haganah
or in
and the
Hebron?
Arban, these are the militias, the terrorist militias that killed so many Palestinians. Those need to be read what happened in Deir Yassin.
Yes, I know what happened in Deir Yassin, and I know what happened in many other communities of Palestinians, and I'm for Palestinians
now
to be
in
able
Gaza.
to reunite with Israel. But you're looking at individuals that are in the context of a war and then blaming it on the whole idea of our whole collective having rights to this
See,
land.
the thing is that you cannot just, if Trump says, I'm not anti-immigrants, we don't believe him. We look at what happened
Let's
in
not
the
bring
streets.
Trump into the situation.
See,
It has nothing to
you
do.
have to look at what's happening on the
Bringing in
ground.
foreign,
You have to look at what's
Western,
happening in
white
Gaza.
people
You have to look
into our civilization is why we're in a
saying
problem.
that Gazans were given warning to leave their homes before
This
they
is
get
true.
bombed.
This is true.
This is the most ridiculous thing I've heard.
Well, I was in Gaza and I saw this happening with my own eyes.
I'm just shocked that you're defending that
It's
again
not
and
defending,
again.
it's actually what happened. Does that
And
mean
what you're saying, it's okay?
No, it's not okay that we were in war. But
No, it's
absolutely-
okay to say to someone, hey, I'm bombing your house tomorrow, get out of here.
So let's add some context. If Hamas is shooting rockets from a house, that also
This is-
Palestinian families
this is
are
the
living there.
propaganda
And
that the
that's not
Israelis
propaganda.
promote.
This is
Trust
you
me.
saying propaganda to things I witnessed with my own eyes. Before I witnessed it, I saw proof. Now I witnessed it. You cannot tell me it's propaganda
it
because
is
you were not there
propaganda.
during the war in Gaza.
It's-
And inshallah, one day we will both be able to go back in Gaza. But during the war, you were not there. This is what happened. When Hamas is shooting rockets from a house onto Israeli civilians, targeting Israeli civilians, and Israel warns the Palestinians living
war
there to
did not
leave.
start in
I don't
October
think
7th.
it started on October 7th.
75 years old.
And it didn't start in 1948 either.
So the fact
But
that
it
you're
can
pushing
end tomorrow.
Palestinians, the fact that you're
I'm not
pushing
pushing
Palestinians,
anybody.
not you.
said
I'm
you.
not. I'm not about myself. I'm representing
You said you.
Palestine.
I'm not-
You're
I'm not
representing
taking it.
Israel. That's
We represent those peoples, but don't say
Correct.
you. You can say they are or Israel is. If something
but you
bad is
cannot come
happening
and
by
say
a
I'm
Palestinian,
defending a movement. I'm defending an ideology, and then
if you are for the Palestinians, I'm not seeing you as Hamas. Okay, I'm seeing you as a doctor in front of me, as my cousin in front of me that has a connection to this land, and we need to be able to build together moving forward.
I would love to believe this, but the reality doesn't give me a chance to believe what's happening.
Well, the younger generation has still hearts
I'm
that's not
hoping
so
that.
darkened, and we will be able to build
I'm
something
hoping
better.
that as
and then
well.
you'll
We
be
have to
able-
pause here. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, I'm actually half Lebanese, and you probably can't tell. The reason is because my mom's from Taiwan, which explains why I look like Bruce Lee's gay son, but that's neither here nor there. The first time I was exposed to what Israel was capable of was the summer of 2006, the 33-day war in Lebanon. There was a firefight that took place between the southern border and northern border of Israel-Lebanon. Hezbollah snuck it over. They killed 8 IDF soldiers, kidnapped 2 of them, hoping that they would get 4 Lebanese prisoners in return. And how did Israel respond? They decided to blanketly carpet bomb the airport, highways, block the port, civilian infrastructure. One of those was my aunt's home. She's not a Hezbollah member. She doesn't live in a military base. And I also remember at that time, my cousins were vacationing in Lebanon, and they told me horror stories about how they were trapped in a basement as hellfire's raining on them. There was no electricity because Israel had bombed the power stations there. They had little water and fuel because Israel had shut off the water and fuel supply. Does this sound familiar? And not only that, they had a friend of theirs whose grandmother was being transported from the south to the north in an ambulance, a marked ambulance with the sirens blaring off to escape the bombing that was going on in the south. And it got blown up, it got attacked. The IDF denied that it happened. So in that war birthed what's known as the Dahiya Doctrine. Even the IDF general at the time, Eisenkot, had said, we will apply destructive force and it doesn't matter. Everything a civilian village is a military base. And this is what we're seeing today in Gaza is the Dahiya Doctrine on steroids. And there is intent to push them out. There wasn't genocide in Gaza because they weren't trying to push out the Lebanese out of Lebanon, but they are doing that in Palestine.
Okay. So even though this is not a conversation about Lebanon, we can talk about that as well because it's obviously related to Israel. And the PLO were very much so involved during that war, and along with Hezbollah and a lot of different issues that was happening on Lebanon. If you want to go into a country that you're about to go to war with, because Hezbollah is constantly shooting rockets onto Israel, attacking Israeli civilians, killing Israelis, so is the PLO with a lot of terrorism. Hold up.
What year?
If they're doing that at that time, okay, then the first thing you need to do is to remove the transportation capabilities of the other army, to remove the airports in order to be able to take out Hezbollah and to end the war. What you're all saying of the horrible stuff that happened, that I'm sorry you had any family member that passed away. Palestinians are my close cousins, but other Arabs are also my cousins. We both descend from Ibrahim, from Ishmael and Yitzhak, so we're all family in this region, and it's horrible what happens to war. The conversation we need to have now is what can we do to remove that and to stop us from happening? Because the consequences
You
of
can
us
stop
using
collectively punishing the civilian population.
You,
Okay,
I'm
we
not
have to
you.
pause here. Their flags are up. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Good, how are you?
Not bad. I want to talk about your claim, which is that Israel's not committing a genocide in Gaza. Earlier, during one of the previous debaters, you said that the definition of genocide was to eliminate a population. Is that still your definition?
Correct.
Okay, so you recognize that that is not the definition of genocide.
That is mostly the definition of genocide.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to know what the full definition of genocide is?
And you're going to say
It's
intent, right?
Yeah, of course, that's
Okay,
part
so-
of it.
so
But that's
exactly.
not the qualm I have. It's the intent to destroy a population in whole or in part. Okay, so you use the evidence of Israel not killing more Palestinians as evidence that it's not a genocide. But the Germans didn't kill every Jewish person. You agree that there was a genocide against the Jewish people
The
and Nazi
intent
Germany,
of Israel
right?
was not to kill in parts the Palestinians
Okay.
either. That is why it's not a genocide, not
what
in whole or in
evidence?
part.
And okay, what-
Every action that Israel does is to prevent
Let
civilian
me just ask you a
casualties
question,
from being
okay?
killed.
How do you adjudicate whether a government intends to eliminate in part or in whole a population?
Right. So if every time that there's an attack against a Hamas site, not against a civilian area that doesn't have Hamas, but specifically a Hamas site that is shooting rockets onto Israeli civilians, and Israel does everything to warn the population there to leave by phone calls, by text messages, by leaflets, sometimes sent 72 hours before, we can see the intent here is to minimize civilian casualties.
And just to be clear-
So this is an example of what Israel
Right.
does in order to have civilians die
I
at
understand.
large or as part.
I understand. Just to be clear, the reason you're saying that is because if they didn't do this, which by the way, this is it's actually a funny standard that you give to Israel, that if they drop leaflets before bombing somebody, that they are proactive and that they're trying to save civilian life. That's actually required by international law. So it's the bare minimum. I just want to make clear. I just want to make
warning
clear.
people before
if
attacking.
they didn't do that, you would say that, well, clearly that's intent to kill civilians, right?
Not necessarily, but
Okay,
it's...
so wait.
No,
So-
hold
so
up.
then
Let
why
me
are you-
answer.
oh, no, because that's important,
If there's
because
a
that is-
firefight, okay, and in
Go
the
ahead.
moment there's no ability to send leaflets or warning, and people get killed in the process, then there are situations where not warning doesn't make
Okay.
it a genocide. So here's an example when certain situations, I know that you're college and you're on the media and everything else, but I actually went to war. So there's certain situations that develop live live where Hamas pops out of nowhere, starts shooting at IDF soldiers. There's a gunfight. There are people who are civilians who are killed, and that is not a genocide because they didn't warn. That's why not warning doesn't make it a genocide either. If the intent is to kill people, then it is a genocide.
I'm assuming that you're talking about when safe zones are bombed, when refugee camps are bombed, leaflets are dropped.
Safe zones were safe before Hamas entered, and then they're no longer safe, correct?
Which shows that Israel's not trying to commit a genocide, right? If you made that point that Israel is dropping leaflets, which shows that they're not intending to commit a genocide, supposedly, if they didn't drop leaflets, that would be showing intent to commit a genocide.
False. I just explained why that's the case. There are situations that happen live.
Then your point, this is I don't know how well versed you are in debate, that's called a fallacy of infallibility.
This is called projection.
If your position cannot be proven wrong, then it is an illegitimate argument to make.
I've proven how. You finish that point.
Because this is important.
And I'm going to respond. If Israel does everything that it can to prevent civilian casualties, that is a proof that shows that its intention is not to kill Palestinian civilians. Do Palestinian civilians get killed?
I'm going to give you an example.
No, I'm going to finish my point now.
No, you want to finish your point.
Of course,
you
I'm
want
going to finish your point
because you've interrupted me and you don't want me to say
your claim, and now I'm going to.
Do you want to hear Al-Mawasi as an example of a refugee camp being bombed without leaflets being dropped?
To your point.
By your own standards.
By your own standards. By the world standards. By the world standards, they're not.
Here's something most people don't think about until it's too late. My wife and I, we now compete to see whose credit score is the highest. But I've definitely had my moments where I realized too late that I was paying more than I needed to based on my credit. Getting your credit over 600 could save you about $2,000 the next time you finance a car. With Kickoff, users with credit under 600 grow an average of 86 points just by paying on time. Their transparent, affordable plans start at just $5 per month. What I like about it is how it prioritizes building consistency. No credit check required, no hidden fees, and zero interest. You can sign up from your phone in just minutes. Start building credit with Kickoff now and get your first month for as little as $1. That's 80% off the normal price when you go to getkickoff.com/surrounded today. That's Kickoff without the C. Get KIKOFF.com/surrounded. Thank you to Kickoff for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to Surrounded.
My next surrounded claim is that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
If you would like to debate this claim, please get to the chair in 3, 2, 1.
All of this is to sow chaos and distract from the focal point. We are opposed to an occupation imposed on the occupied people. If I'm opposed to that occupation, I'm opposed to the ideology of that occupation, which is Zionism. Therefore, I'm not against the people that supposedly tie themselves to that identity. I'm against said identity. So if I'm against Zionism, it should be very clear I'm against anyone who supports it, whether they're Jewish or not, because you mentioned Christian Zionism. You're obviously opposed to that. So am I, because I'm not about this person or that person. If there was a Muslim Zionist, I would be opposed to them. It's the ideology, not the person. And the actual, in my opinion, most Zionists are Christians. Christian Zionists, yes, you can go ahead. But all of this is a smokescreen to distract from the focal point.
It's very sad that you have so much pain in your heart and have gone through so much that someone speaking in front of you that actually has compassion and is genuine in front of you, have to see it as tactics or that there's an objective or that there's a motive. There isn't. Okay, I see you as my family, like I've said before. These are not just because we need to hear it over and over and over because we're denying it and rejecting it, and that exists on both sides. I say it to Israelis all the time. I debate Israeli extremists all the time. We need to be able to transcend. Now, let me explain why.
There's no this extremist or that extremist.
Why Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism. Right? There are many ways that someone can be against the population, including the Jews. Hitler wanted to kill all of the Jews. Some Nazis wanted to just kick Jews out. Some Nazis wanted to have Jews there, but just give them different rights. There are different ways of being anti the Jewish people. One of the ways of being anti the Jewish people is to be against the idea and the movement of our right to live in our ancestral homeland.
Who determines that, right? Why do you have the exception to say, I have a right to do this, I have a right to do that? Like, where does that exception come from? Why do you have this?
The indigenous argument of any indigenous people's
rights
to self-determination.
Which is part of the smoke.
It's not debunked. It's actually been proven. A lot of people even here claim to be Jewish, and you know your ancestors are Jews as well, from that land. We come from this civilization, both of us, the Jewish people are indigenous. That is the civilization you actually descend from, and you opted out by either converting to Christianity or Islam or Arabized over time.
The same way you want me
another
you didn't do
identity
it.
that was
My
created,
ancestors,
which is
not me. My ancestors that I can't speak to.
60%
maybe they
of
were Canaanite.
Palestinian-
Maybe they were this. Maybe they were that. That
60%
doesn't
of
matter.
Palestinian ancestry, according to genetic studies that have been done over the decades, shows that they descend from the Jewish population. And in cities like Yatta, Yafo, Tzfat, Hebron, Shrem, if you go to East Jerusalem, those population of Palestinians is up to 90 to 80%. Again, like I said earlier, you can find publications like Nature, American Journal of Human Genetics, studies done by Nebel, by Hammer, by Behar. These are very clearly proven that Palestinians descend from there, and so do the Jewish people. If the Jews want to live in their ancestral homeland, that is a form of decolonization movement.
All of this is a moot point that could be debunked with a 10-second Google search.
Okay, we got to
Someone
pause
distracts
there.
the
We have to
focal
pause
point. Google
there.
it. I actually
Flags
gave
are
all
up.
the sources.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
April 2025, the IOF forces made a complete blockade, no food aid, no shelter, nothing getting in to Gaza. There has been 470 people, mainly women and children, that have died from severe malnourishment, and it's expected to be 10,000 of these people who die from severe malnourishment. It's been declared a famine in Gaza. Famine. There has been journalists. This is the highest amount of journalists that we've ever seen die. 270 journalists have been targeted, killed. This is more than we've seen in World War I, World War II, the Civil War, the post 9/11 wars, all combined.
Okay, you made 2 points.
No. These are my points to say this is what happens under a Zionist regime.
Okay. So this is what happens during war. If we look,
this is what happens during genocide.
I let you finish.
You starve a population.
I didn't do anything. Okay, don't you?
I'm sorry.
Okay,
the Israeli
government. We can talk about the Israeli government.
Sure.
Right now, it's me and you as human beings that are talking about the situation.
But
right?
you support it.
No, I don't support people being starved and people dying and
but you're
people
supporting
suffering.
The regime.
I understand why things are happening, and I'm trying to focus on that in order to change it from happening so that people don't die anymore. Not just using selecting instances of Palestinian suffering when it fits an agenda in order to manipulate
Selective starvation?
No,
473
are you talking about the thousands of
children
Palestinians that died in the Syrian civil war, by the hundreds of thousands?
I'm talking
of
about the people that are in
camps?
Gaza right now,
of course,
that are not having. They are living in tents.
Only
They're dying
Palestinians
from
when it
being
comes to
freezed
Israel do you
out
like
and
to talk
having
about
no.
them?
But
Why
I'm
don't you
talking
talk about
these contexts
other Palestinians that are
now.
suffering as well?
There's 197 buildings
let's talk about
that are
the
rubble
famine
now.
and the block
197
of aid.
buildings.
The reason why aid was blocked, which I'm not for, is because Hamas was stealing all of that food.
No.
Yes.
Nope.
Hamas was stealing that food, killing other Palestinians.
So don't you think you should let more food in instead of blocking it? Where's the logic
I think
there?
should have been done. Here's a legitimate criticism.
More
Israel
food
created a
should be
safe
let in.
zone.
You know
what Israel could have done
Doctors
is to
said
remove the
that people
population
would come
from where
in,
Hamas
when
is.
they come out from the food aid, they'd all be shot in the same place on the same day. The one day people would come in with a shot in their arm. Everybody,
the
because it
videos
was
that
a
we have
game.
is of Hamas shooting Palestinians trying to get aid.
It's the
There are plenty of
ISIS-backed
videos
gangs
that are happening.
that Netanyahu has already agreed to.
Flags are up. You've been voted out.
Well, I think criticizing a regime is not criticizing an identity. That was a point that was already brought up. But I have a question for you. Do you agree with the current strategy with the Board of Peace in order to bring stability to the Gaza region?
I don't.
And what are some of the criticisms that you have of that plan?
So first of all, I completely agree with you that criticizing a regime is not anti-Semitic. Like I said earlier, I don't know one Israeli that doesn't criticize the Israeli government. That's not anti-Semitism. That's not anti-Zionism either. When you're against the right for the Jewish people to live there, that's when it becomes anti-Semitic. Now, when it comes to the Board of Peace and Trump's policies and trying to create the French Riviera in Gaza and all these things, we are on the same page that this is horrible. There should be no imposition of the United States, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or any foreign entity coming into this land. This is the land of the Israelis and the Palestinians. And we have to create one civilization for both where we have equality in this land.
And so it's a democratic state, a one-state solution.
Yes, one civilization I call, because one state implies
you don't believe,
the current political system, which
you don't
is
believe
flawed.
that Jewish, or there needs to be a Jewish identity that's central to the governance
I do.
of Israel.
Of course
so how could it be a democratic regime if everybody has autonomy and equal rights, if one ethnicity is prioritized over all others?
Great question. This is honest conversation. I'm happy we're having it. So first of all, there are non-negotiables for the Jews and non-negotiables for the Palestinians. For the Palestinians, it's the right of return and freedom from the river to the sea. That creates a problem to today's Jewish non-negotiables, which are full economic, political, and military control over the land. Jerusalem is the capital, and the third temple is built. Now, how are you going to have these two things that are non-negotiable for both? Well, the idea of Palestinians returning to the land makes a demographic problem and a cultural problem. Today, a lot of Palestinians hate Israelis. They wouldn't want to live in Israel.
That is such an overgeneralization. I have to stop you there.
A lot of Palestinians...
But just to say to the camera, what this is advocating for is an ethno-state that prioritizes one particular population over those that already had regime there.
Now you're putting words into people's hands.
That is
I did not say that there were priorities of individuals. There's a collective that are indigenous to land. It will be...
We'll let you continue.
Yes, let me finish.
I'll actually give the truth to the camera as soon as you're done with this bullshit.
There's 16 million people, Jews in the world, right? Those are the descendants of 2.5 tribes. There are 9.5 tribes that are missing as a part of that number. We were 12 tribes once upon a time. That population today that still identifies as a part of the Jewish people are 100 million outside of the 16 million. And half of them want to make Aliyah to move to Israel. So we would have 50 million Jews coming back to the land of Israel. Palestinians also returning. A lot of things have to happen before that day happens, where we change the culture, we create freedom of speech, which does not exist in Palestinian societies. We change the structure of education. And once we have something that we can both live together, we can have our aspirations together.
It is just.
Now, are you Palestinian?
Can I continue?
I'm just asking one question. I want to understand what
I'm not Palestinian, no. Okay. And I don't believe that identity gives credibility to those arguments.
No, it shows if someone's speaking as a fan or as a player.
No, whoa. A fan?
Or a player. Are you pro-Palestinian or are you Palestinian?
I don't think that we should view this as a fucking sports game, dude. I'm sorry to curse again. I'm sorry to curse.
It's not a sports game.
I can recognize an atrocity when I see it because I believe what my eyes are telling me.
Is October 7th an atrocity?
I believe that any innocent life that has died is something
October 7th an atrocity.
Any innocent life that dies needs to be condemnable.
So much for recognizing atrocities.
I just said any innocent life that dies needs to be condemnable. All I'm saying is it is an insane point to say that being anti-Zionism means you're anti-Semitic because you're spitting in the face of Jewish voices for Palestine. You're spitting in the face of Jewish voices for peace. All of these are people that recognize their identity as Jewish people that can also call out atrocities when they see it. Because they don't believe that just because they have a shared ethnicity means they need to endorse an ethno-state that is brutally killing people indiscriminately. They can recognize when they see something that is a human rights failure and advocate against that. What I want to make clear real quick, and I'll let you speak. I will completely...
And I'll let you respond after to your next claim, okay? There are populations within all peoples that turn against their own. There are individual Palestinians, let me finish. Yes,
are turning against their own.
There are tokens who side with their oppressors in order to try to be accepted in the modern world.
How is Palestinians oppressing Israelis when Israel's controlling the region?
They side with the world that hates the Jewish people and hates Israel and are attacking it in order to be accepted.
Israel is the only military in the Middle East that is backed by the most powerful regime in the entire world. So what are you talking about?
They're supporting also Egypt and they're supporting other places because the intent of the United States is to create conflict in that region and to profit so that you and your country can go and profit over here because that money goes straight to U.S. weapon companies, which I'm against. I do not want the involvement of the United States.
We have to pause. We've got flags up. Can you return to your seat?
So I want to do something. I want to start with good faith, okay? This issue gets all of us heated. I can recognize that, me, myself included. So I'm not trying to do a gotcha. I'm not trying to be offensive. I want to first recognize that you are someone who is separate from the, precondition of Israeli rhetoric of never, ever recognizing Palestinian identity or existence. I think you're doing it in a strategic way, but I want to recognize that you have moved the bar a little bit. So that's commendable to an extent. But you fail to recognize the pain that's not in front of your face. You say you see your Palestinian, comrades, your cousins that are sitting here, but not the ones over there. So your claim was anti-Zionism.
I see the ones there too.
Okay, anti-Zionism is, I'm gonna make my claim. You said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. But you constantly come back to this idea that people who are anti-Zionist don't want Jews to be in Israel. But that's not what anti-Zionism is.
That's what Zionism
I'm
means.
not finished with my claim. Anti-Zionism is that Jews should not have supremacy when they are there.
That's not what anti-Zionism means.
And when you're discussing anti-Semitism, what I really struggle with, and I want to bring up Peter Beinart. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a Jewish scholar, and I really recognize that he is doing something important, which is bringing the voice back to why Jews should be against this in the first place, and why when they're not, it creates conditions of anti-Semitism. I believe your efforts are more anti-Semitic because you're creating a monolith of the Jews. You are saying Jews are never capable of committing such violence. Jews are always the victim. In the Book of Esther,
yes,
when Purim, the celebration of Purim, right? Can we recognize that 75,000 Gentiles were killed by the Jews? The Jews commit that atrocity.
No.
They didn't. So this wasn't in the Book of Esther. This didn't happen?
No, the Jews did not commit atrocities.
Because Jews are not capable of committing
Jews
atrocities.
Jewish individuals are capable, of course.
What about
the collective
a Jewish collective?
isn't.
So Israel is not a Jewish collective? You just keep saying that Israel is a Jewish collective. It's not?
Israel is the country of the Jewish people.
Okay.
Would it be hypothetically capable of doing something wrong? Absolutely. Has it also done other things wrong? Yes. I'm not talking about that the state is not capable of doing things that are wrong.
Do you recognize that when you say every Israeli criticizes the Israeli government?
Correct. To show that criticism is not anti-Semitism.
But here's the issue.
But you're not criticizing,
Israel,
you're demonizing.
In Israel, a Jewish person can say, I don't believe in God. But if you want to be part of the Knesset, you cannot be anti-Zionist. So you can't actually question the system from within. You cannot question the structure.
So anti-Semitism, there are 3 Ds in order to recognize them when it comes to Israel. If you demonize the Jewish people, if you delegitimize our existence,
every person
and if you're
would,
holding a double standard
I'm making an assumption. I might be wrong. Every person here looks like they're anti-Zionist.
I let you communicate. I'm going to address the actual point, which is the claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. If you're trying to delegitimize the Jewish people's right and claim to the land and existence, if you're trying to demonize us and make us seem as monsters and take out all context to make it seem as Israel's the worst thing in the world and now connect it to other problems in the world, if you're trying to hold a double standard where you care about some
Rudy,
Palestinians, but not all Palestinians, you are an anti-Semite
I
if you
wasn't
are
going to
doing
get
that.
passionate. I did, so I'll apologize for that. I'll come back. I want to address that. Don't move forward. I want to address it.
No, I'm not moving forward. I'm finishing the point. Zionism is the idea. This is why definitions are important. Zionism comes from the word Zion, which is Jerusalem, and the idea that we have a right to return and self-determine on this ancestral homeland. To be against this idea, to be anti-Zionism, is against the idea that the Jewish people should have a right to self-determine. That is anti-Semitic. Now, if you're against certain policies the government is doing, the treatment of Palestinians, the suffering of Palestinians, that is not anti-Zionism. That is being pro-Palestinian talking. We have to differentiate those points. When I'm saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, is by defining Zionism. And you know who gets to define Zionism? The Jewish collective, the Jewish people. And if you're going to source me individual Jews that you can hold on a handful who, unfortunately, due to the trauma that we face and the generational trauma that has been projected onto our people, then end up siding with an oppressive world that always blames the Jewish people for all problems, that is not a source of reference. There are individual Palestinians who also hate all the Palestinians, and they're not the people I'm going to source to talk for the Palestinian people.
I want to identify something. In your claim, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Yes.
I'm going to make an assumption that every person around us is an anti-Zionist. Here, can you identify one anti-Semitic rhetoric that someone has said?
There's delegitimization of our identity, saying, oh, no, it was originally the Canaanites. It wasn't the Jews. You guys aren't the real Jews. You guys are converts. All anti-Semitic points. Then there's demonization. Oh, you guys are monsters and you kill indiscriminately, you carpet bomb. Then there's holding double standards, where you don't care about actual genocides happening in the world. You don't care about Palestinians dying in other cases. You only care about using them when they can be used as Israel. That is called anti-Semitism.
So what you have just done is identify all of the things that everyone has done around you.
Anti-Semitic points.
Okay. And you are recognizing that something has been done wrong to you. Can anyone around us say that Rudy is doing something wrong to us? Yes,
sure,
they can.
If I did, sure.
But they're not putting this label on you that because of that, then all your points fail.
No, I'm not.
You have this sense that people are being anti.
There are points that we agree on.
Flags up. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return.
Let me give it to you. You're a good debater. There is no doubt about that. You've been trained very well to talk about this by yourself. But this is the problem. The problem is that you're trying to give yourself the right to define what's Zionism, and you're not giving us the right to define what do we mean by being anti-Zionists. When we say we're anti-Zionist, we do not present any hatred toward any Jews or any Jewish people or any community. What we're trying to say, we're against what the Israeli government is doing. That's what we mean. So if we're going to try to fight for hours to define what do you mean by Zionism, what do I mean by anti-Zionism, what we're trying to say is that the Israeli government, that you're part of it, part of the IDF, part of the Israeli community, that you're defending what they're doing.
I'm not part
we
of
are completely against what this government is doing. You're trying to defend what they're doing in Gaza. You're trying to justify and give excuses. That's outrageous for us. We don't accept that.
So, Doctor, you did something that's very important that I think that we can transcend the conversation is by understanding what we're saying rather than terms. The reason why I'm saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is because I'm giving a very specific definition of Zionism, which is the official definition, and the definition that historically was and currently is that the Jewish people...
So that's not what we mean.
Exactly. This is why we need to have a conversation of what do you truly mean. When I say I'm a Zionist, I'm not talking about suffering of Palestinians. I want Palestinians to be able to return. I want Palestinians to be able to live.
But your actions are louder than your words.
Palestinians are actually working to that. I work with Palestinian leaders in Gaza and in the West Bank to actually change the situation.
You are blaming Palestinians for what's happening in Gaza.
I'm not blaming Palestinians for what's happening in Gaza.
You just said that.
I actually blamed the U.S. government for their foreign aid. I blame the British for what they did into our country. And I would like to see us being able to transcend. But what you are doing is so important because everyone who's listening can realize we need to understand what we're actually saying. If you're condemning the suffering of Palestinians, that is not being anti-Zionist. And if you're miscommunicating that and Israelis are hearing you saying, I'm an anti-Zionist, let's ask you what you truly mean by that. And if we mean different things, then let's put those words to the side and actually care about what we mean. What is a future vision that we can live together in this land that includes both of us?
What the Israeli government is trying to do right now is to push for criminalizing any criticism of the state of Israel. Any criticism of the government.
I don't know one Israeli that doesn't criticize the Israeli government.
But Americans are not having that right. See, Americans nowadays are realizing what the Middle Easterns and the Palestinians have been dealing with for the past 75 years. Which is the reason there are dictatorships in the Middle East is to protect the state of Israel. Whether you believe it or not, that's what people.
Why there's dictatorship.
That's what people believe.
So there was no dictatorships before the state of Israel.
You know who's second receiving of American and U.S. aid after Israel? Egypt. Why is that? You know why the CC is put in place? Why is that? That's what the people of the Middle East believe.
Well, we're going to agree on that.
Now Americans are coming to realize, hold on, you're attacking my freedom of speech. You know how many people lost their jobs, lost their school or education because they're criticizing the actions of the government of Israel?
There's absolutely freedom of speech in Israel. Okay, whether you're Palestinian or Israeli, you have the right to say what you want.
So there is freedom. It's not the same all over.
What you're talking about in Gaza, where Hamas doesn't allow people to talk, or in the Palestinian Authority-controlled areas,
talking about
where they don't allow.
We're trying to define what doing by anti-Zionism.
Okay, but I'm not in the U.S., so I'm not here to.
No, but we're talking about that right now.
We have to remove all military investments and control of the United States and other European countries into the Middle East because they are the ones who plagued us to be in the conflict to begin with.
You know what happened to Rabin when he tried to put that? He was assassinated.
Because he wanted to separate our land, which you would agree that is against that, right? Do you think that we should have two states? We shouldn't divide this land.
The problem is that we always talk about the two solutions, one state solution, but most of the Israelis, they're looking for a third solution.
Which is?
Ethnic cleansing.
I don't support
getting
that
everyone
solution.
out of here. That's what they want to do.
And there's a fourth solution where Palestinians also want to ethnically cleanse the Jews. We can talk about extremist opinions on both sides.
But if you and I,
the majority of the people do you believe that there should be one civilization? The reason I don't use one state is because the current political system that we have with the Knesset is completely corrupt and horrible, and we have to create something new that is a republic that people have a right to defend, but something new. Do you believe in one civilization for both of our people?
If it's equal rights,
yes.
If it's fair, if it's just, yes.
So let's talk about how we can get there.
Well, if Palestinians and Jews agree to have a one-state solution, it won't be a Jewish state.
It will be a Jewish state.
So that's you're asking what I'm looking. My vision for it cannot be a Jewish state.
Why not? What is a Jewish state that's a problem for you?
Because it's not a democratic state.
But it could be both. It could be both, right?
What do you mean? No.
Why would it not be a democratic state?
States have to be secular.
Oh, sure, but you could have also a culture of a country.
A Jewish state,
a Chinese state, a Japanese state is going to be Japanese by its culture.
But a Jewish state will have rights for Jewish people more than the rights of others.
No, I don't believe more.
That's what happening.
Actually,
that's what happening to Palestinians who live under the Israeli rule.
No, those who are living in Israel, they don't have to serve in the army. They don't have to do a lot of things that the Israeli.
Have you talking to them? Have you spoken to any of those people?
Of Palestinians who live as Israeli citizens who don't have to serve in the army. Don't have to
they are second or third class citizens.
They're not second or third class.
Oh, absolutely,
they are equal citizens.
See, I don't know if you're oblivious or you're lying. I'm sorry.
I have many Palestinian friends, Israeli Arab friends that are living in this land.
So kindly talking softly, but either you're lying or you're oblivious.
Or I'm actually someone who lives in this land, and I'm getting away from the narratives of just demonizing completely.
Are you brainwashed to see what's happening there? Are you in a bubble?
Projection, maybe.
What do you mean?
What you're saying, brainwashing. People have equal rights in the land of Israel.
You're talking out loud and you're denying things that exist.
No, people in Israel, whether you are Palestinian or identify as Israeli Arab or whatever you identify with, if you're not Jewish, you have equal rights to the Jews.
I am having lunch with people after this who are Israeli citizens, but they're Palestinians.
And what differences do they have in their rights?
Oh, they talk a lot about how they're mistreated all the time.
Okay, you said about rights. I disagree with mistreatment. It might be individual cases. We can talk about that, but talk about rights. You said that there are different rights and they're second and third class citizens. What rights are different?
That technicality, they don't have the same protection.
Of course they have the same protection.
No, they don't.
What is the different protection?
Oh, they don't.
What is the protection I have that an Israeli Arab doesn't?
You can sing and say whatever you want.
They can sing and say whatever they want.
Don't.
Actually, I can't go to the Temple Mount and be able to sing my songs.
No,
and they're
don't.
able to.
Let's say a Palestinian Akka decide to say, you know what, I support Hamas. Is he allowed to do that? No, he's not.
I mean, you support an organization that wants to kill individuals?
I'm talking as an Israeli. Okay. You can say that.
If someone here came to the United States where you're currently living and said, I support ISIS, what do you think would happen to them?
But that's equal for all of them.
What's equal for
regardless of all of them, regardless of their faith, regardless of their ethnicity.
If someone supports Hamas, there'll be a problem.
In Israel, a Jewish could say it differently than a Palestinian. Not the same.
Yes, it is. You know
not
why?
Not the same.
If they're actually plotting to do something.
I'm not saying plotting.
Okay?
I said freedom of speech. You mentioned freedom of speech.
There are plenty of Israeli Arabs who openly support Hamas. You can go to Tel Aviv University. You can go to Hebrew University. You can see them protesting, supporting Hamas, and nothing happens to them.
Sheikh Salah was been put prison because of that. There's so many people.
Because they were a part or supporting or in connection to.
Because of words
not
that they
because
say.
the words that they say.
What we're we're debating here.
If those words is I want to go
Israeli
and help
Jews
them, then that's different.
have the same rights as the Israeli Palestinians.
Israeli Arabs, Palestinians,
Israeli Arabs.
yes, they have the same rights.
They're not.
They have the same rights.
People
Actually,
who live
we
there,
have to do more than them because we have to serve in the army.
I'm sorry for giving this example. I don't want to say it, but let's say a certain ethnicity here in America says all of us have the same rights and opportunities. It's not. It's not the case.
Okay, but why do you keep using examples of other places rather than talking about our own home?
To make it easier for you to understand,
about
to get it closer to you, because it doesn't look like you understand what we're talking here.
The original colonizers, white people who took this land, who took black slaves, and brought, because that's what you're talking about, and brought them into the society here, and the relationship between them has nothing to do with peoples who are native to this land together, and other people coming in and causing us to fight one another.
What's your ethnic background? Where are your parents, grandparents? Where did they live?
My ancestors come from Israel.
No, after that.
When we were displaced from Israel?
Yeah, where was it?
Okay, on my mother's side, Morocco and Algeria. My dad's side, Poland and Belgium.
Okay.
That is the displacement that we went through.
You're kind of half-half.
Yeah, I'm half Ashkenazi, half Sephardi experience.
Palestinian Jews have different rights than someone who never been to Palestine.
What does that mean, a Palestinian Jew?
A Jewish person who lived in Palestine
okay, so
before the establishment of Israel.
So today they're Israeli citizens.
What I'm trying to say, there's a big difference between the rights of a Jewish who came from Poland and Germany and had no connection to the land with someone who lived there all their lives.
Well, first of all, the Jews that were displaced doesn't mean that they don't come from this land. As Palestinians who are now born second, third generation in Chile, in America, in Jordan, and other places, they also have a connection to the land. We're not going to erase it because they had a displacement.
Kicking people out of their homes.
I'm against kicking people out. We're talking about right now the fact that they had a displacement. It doesn't disconnect them from the land.
The reality of the matter is the fact what's happening on the ground.
I would appreciate not considering Ashkenazi Jews as foreigners. When the state of Israel was created, every single citizen of that state, whether Jewish or non-Jewish,
how do you see the Ethiopian
rights.
Jews?
What about the Ethiopian Jews?
How do you see them?
I see them as my brothers and sisters.
How they are being treated.
Actually, my main project that I'm doing in my life is bringing back the rest of the tribes of Israel in Africa, not just the Ethiopians, but the Igbos in Nigeria.
I don't know why we're having a debate if we agree on everything. We're talking about you came to present the point of view of an Israeli government and the Jewish people in
I'm
Israel.
not here to present the view of the Israeli government. You were falsely communicated. That's what they did. Okay. I'm here to represent my own positions, which many Jews and many Israelis believe in, that we can be able to live together. And the definitions that we have are very, very important, because you're saying you're not against the right for the Jewish people to self-determine on the ancestral homeland, which makes you not an anti-Zionist, which makes you not...
No, I am an anti-Zionist, because that's not what I believe in,
right?
Zionism.
A different definition.
Exactly.
And that's why it's important to understand the definitions aren't what's important.
What I'm trying to make you understand that people who are here, who
say
we are...
what a Palestinian is?
No, but I'm defining myself.
I'm
talking about myself. Everybody's here who says I'm anti-Zionist, they are anti-apartheid, anti-genocide, anti-ethnic cleansing, anti the brutal treatment of the Israeli government of the Palestinians, anti-colonization, anti-confiscating of lands, anti all kind of racism and inequality that's happening in Palestine to the Palestinians. That's what we define by saying we are anti-Zionism. That is not a racist, that's not anti-Semitic, that's nothing that has to do with the Jewish faith.
Right.
It's all about the actions and the atrocities that the Israeli government is committing. So that's what we mean.
I'm against apartheid, genocide.
So you're an anti-Zionist. Good job.
Colonization, settlements, which is not.
Good job. We are proud of you now.
Which is not taking place there. Okay. And when you are saying that you're an anti-Zionist, to be anti-something, you have to know what that something is. And as a doctor, as someone who's very intellectual, as someone who lived in this land, has experience, knows other Jews, you should know that Zionism existed before anti-Zionism. And Zionism is the idea that we have a right to self-determine on that ancestral homeland.
The way you and your fellow Jewish and Israeli citizens define and raise the flag of Zionism, that's what makes us say we are anti-Zionist.
No,
that's what's happening.
What I'm telling you now, I'm here right in front of you, is that Zionism only means the idea that it should have a right to live in this land, and I'm against the suffering of Palestinians.
On the expense
I'm
of
against
everybody else.
No, not
with
at the
all
expense.
price, with all expense.
Why are you always blaming the Jews and Israelis as the expense?
Because that's happened.
No, because you see it as a zero-sum game. There's a good guy and there's a bad guy. What about the communities of Israel that were destroyed?
Okay, we've got to pause here. We're out of time for this claim. Please return to your seats.
My next surrounded claim is that Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel.
All right, if you would like to be the first debater, get to the seat in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Likewise. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, so I'd like to know more about why you believe that and where that comes from.
Sure. So when I make a claim about the Jewish people, it's never against another population. When I'm saying that the Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel, it's where we come from. If you dig in the land, you find our history. This is the land that our ancestors have come from. We've maintained a constant presence, and thankfully we were able to come back to that land freely.
Sure. Would you identify yourself as a Zionist?
So I'd say that there are many different thought leaders that were involved in the modern political movement called Zionism, and that there are many different branches, the right-wing Zionism, left-wing Zionism, secular Zionism, religious Zionism, even Christian Zionism, which I'm completely against. But the fundamental idea of Zionism, which comes from the word Zion, which means Jerusalem, is the idea that the Jewish people should have a right to self-determine on their ancestral homeland of Judea/Israel. So do I believe that the Jews should have a right to come back home? Absolutely, I do.
Sure. So I was also wondering why, because this is a debate about pro-Palestine versus pro-Israel, I was also wondering why you believe that indigeneity plays a role in pro-Israel actions.
For sure. So to define indigeneity first, if the United Nations actually defined it for what is widely accepted in academic spaces, which is that your identity is the pre-colonial identity that was born and rooted to a particular and specific piece of land that is essential to that people's identity and way of life. They've maintained a constant presence in that land, and they collectively identify with this term. And the reason why it's so important to speak about this is because there are a lot of people who claim to be pro-Palestinian, who use Palestinian struggles in order to try to delegitimize my ancestral connection and my right to live there. So I'm for the right for other people to live there as well. But when people are trying to delegitimize who I am and the collective that belongs here as well, that's when I have a problem.
Okay, so here's sort of where I'm coming from. From what I understand about indigeneity, it is a concept just like intelligence, love, which means that it can be essentially defined by what it is, but not necessarily, it's more difficult to define what it isn't. My understanding of indigeneity that it has relation against colonialism. Also, similarly, my understanding of Zionism is that, especially through settler action, we know that it is a colonial project. So it's very difficult for me to understand how you can be both indigenous and the colonizer.
So I look at Zionism as an anti-colonial movement, a movement that the previous colonizers that were here were the British, firstly being the Romans that colonized the land, renamed it to Palestine, and kicked out the majority of the Jewish people.
Sure.
Then we have the Byzantine Empire, we have the Caliphates, we have the Ottomans, and eventually we have the British.
Does that have any say on the Jewish Palestinians who exist, who are not afforded full citizenship? What happens to them? Because Palestinians aren't a monolith, and we understand
are not receiving full citizenship. And I
well,
don't know.
If you're Palestinian, then you don't have full citizenship
we're not
in the
talking
state of
about
Israel.
Jews. Right. So we're talking about now the consequences have happened after the British were here.
Sure.
And the way that British colonized.
Do you think that?
Let me just
do you think
answer
that their
part.
citizenship is a direct action of the British?
No, I think that the division of the land is a direct consequence of what the British did to our populations.
Okay.
Let me explain where that comes from.
Okay, we have to pause there. You've been voted out by the majority. Sure, please return to your
Just
seat.
getting good.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Baruch Hashem.
So I want to start with something I wrote that you said. You said, return of the people to the land and indigeneity is pre-colonial identity. You were identifying the Jews being indigenous, and that's why they were not practicing colonialism. It was pre-colonial. Would you agree with how I described your sentiment?
So the idea that the Jews should have a right to return to their ancestral homeland is a decolonization movement, not a colonization movement. Now, we can criticize certain policies the government has, the IDF has, and I might even agree with certain things. There's a lot of criticism that I have of the current structure. But by its nature, it is an anti-colonial decolonization movement.
So there are words in Hebrew that were used pre the creation of the state of Israel that mean to settle, to colonize. And they were used in the correspondence of Ben Gurion, the Lehi, and it was very clear that they were using language. It's to settle, to colonize. If they believed themselves to not be colonizers, why were they directly using this language back then?
Back then, what that term meant was development of land. So if you read Herzl's writing, he talks about that the native inhabitants are the Jewish people. There are other inhabitants, what we call today as Palestinians, who live there, and we should live together with them. And the use of the term colonization then, because obviously today it's not a popular word, we're all against this idea, then meant development of the land. So you have to also understand the context in which words are being used, because words are sounds coming out of our mouths, and the meanings have to do.
Do you recognize that right now, because the world, the West has now recognized that colonialism is bad, we are saying, oh, we don't identify with that language. That language meant something back then, and it was used for a particular reason.
And it means different than what it means today.
You dissociating yourself, or Israel dissociating itself from that language, does not erase the preconditions that it existed, the plan that it was trying to achieve.
The plan that it was trying to achieve is to bring back sovereignty to the indigenous population. When you dig in this line, you find Jewish history. This is where we come from. Now, there are individuals that use the term colonization because then it was very popular. And it didn't mean go and exploit another population, take away their resources, exploit it back to a motherland. That's not what it meant then. That's what it means today. And so back then it meant the development of land. We both agree.
Development of land is exactly colonial language, and it's being used today consistently. This language is consistent.
If you are an indigenous person and you want to develop your land, that's not colonization. It is colonization or not colonization.
If people existed in that land prior to you going to develop that land, they are also indigenous to that land.
The Jews had a constant presence, and I didn't make an argument against Palestinians.
The Jews did have a concept.
I'm not making an argument against Palestinians. I'm making an argument that the Jews
with
are indigenous to the land of Israel.
Arabs, with Christians,
and I'm all for that.
And they existed.
I'm all for
but
that
what
coexistence.
happened? The development meant erasing all of that.
The
Meant
British,
erasing their identity of indigeneity as well. It was just Jewish indigeneity, just Jewish supremacy.
This is what I was saying in my previous point, okay? The way that the British colonized every single region is they divided and conquered. We can see the consequence of that between Pakistan and India. We can see that in Afghanistan. We can see that in Nigeria between the Igbos, the Hausa Fulani, and the Yoruba.
And we can see that in Israel
And we
as well.
can see that absolutely, where they convinced the Israeli population that Palestinians, the Arabs and Muslims were all their enemies, and they convinced the Palestinian and Arabs that the Jews were just an extension of European colonialism, which you're falling into. And unfortunately, we fought a war in 1948 for which I was not there, and the consequences of that war and the several wars that happened after is the situation that we're in today.
So you're saying that the British had a plan of colonization and that Ben Gurion, Herzl, and every person, or Shamir, the leader of Lehi, who actually reached out to Hitler to work with Hitler to start. You're laughing. Maybe you're not familiar with it.
I'm very familiar with the Zionists reaching out to the Nazis in order to get them to let the Jews leave so that they wouldn't kill them.
The leader of Lehi, who became the prime minister of Israel, had correspondence, reached out to Hitler and asked for my enemy to work with me to take over the land of Palestine, to take over Israel.
The British were the ones controlling the mandate of Palestine at that time.
Exactly.
Not the Nazis.
The Lehis were willing to work with Nazis
they were not willing to
colonize
They were
Israel.
trying to get their people out of what was being controlled by the Nazis. If you have a hostage taken by,
excuse me, I
if
just
you
want
have
to check.
someone that takes a hostage, you're going to negotiate with them to get them out of there.
Interesting.
So the Zionists. Wait, let me finish my point because I let you finish.
I just want to ask. You didn't let me finish. You were speaking the entire time.
You asked the question and I get to answer. Okay, you talked about the fact that the Zionists had relations and contact with the Nazis. This is true. The Nazis had occupied.
Exactly.
Yes, the Nazis had occupied the European area, and the Jews were under their authority. So the Zionists wanted to get the Jews out of there so that they wouldn't be killed.
The British in Israel and Palestine.
I'm talking about the Nazis in Europe. They had taken control over Europe, and the Jews realized that they would be killed. So the Zionists tried to negotiate to get the Jews out. This has nothing to do. You're mixing a whole bunch of things.
You are mixing facts
to come
up.
To
you are mixing.
Sorry, we have to pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
So it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is revisionist history. It's actually so funny that you call Zionism a decolonial movement when the Zionists needed the sponsor of a colonial empire like the British, and today cannot exist without a settler colonial state and an empire like the United States. Without these two things, that project would not have been possible. There's a reason why Theodore Herzl had to petition to the Ottomans, to other European powers until the Balfour Declaration was issued. And if you look at that declaration, out of the 28 articles in there, seven of them focused on the rights of Jews and didn't even mention the word Palestinians. It mentioned the non-Jewish population. And with that revisionist history, why do we forget about the Arab Revolt in 1936, which the British squashed while they let the Zionists develop their own proto-state? They had arms, they had a paramilitary, they had a parliament. Palestinians weren't allowed to have that, and if they did, it was squashed. So you can't just say colonization is just words. Logically, that's colonization. There's no one denying that there is a Jewish history in Palestine. No one is saying that Jews can't or shouldn't live there. But there's a difference between coming and living and coexisting versus coming and drawing borders and maintaining it through guns, through iron walls, which Jabotinsky mentioned. That doesn't sound indigenous. And speaking of indigeneity, if you are so indigenous or you claim to be indigenous, why did they bomb the orange trees in Jaffa, just as you see the olive trees being burned in the West Bank? And with all of that said as well, why are the houses that were destroyed, if you were so decolonial, why were they destroyed and rebuilt with European-style architecture? Why do many Israelis participate in Eurovision? Why do they identify more with Europe? That doesn't sound indigenous to me.
There's a lot of questions. Let me try to answer. So first of all, Salam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Mohammad. It's nice to meet you. I'm glad to be able to speak.
You're funny.
It's the truth. You know, I'm from that land, okay? We're both actually from this land, and I don't hate you. And the idea of me greeting you respectfully is something that is clearly making you laugh, because it's uncomfortable or it's new. And I think that there's...
No, it doesn't shock me at all.
Let me finish my saying. I think there's a new generation that's being formed that live in the land, that recognize each other's suffering, identity, and want to build something further. Now, let me be able to answer your claim.
You believe the suffering is parallel?
I let you go off on like 3 minutes of many different claims. I'm going to try to get back to all of them. There's a lot that you said there. So first of all, why is it a anti-colonial decolonization movement? Like we said, the original population, the first peoples of the land are the Hebrews / the Judeans / the Israelites. We were colonized by the Roman Empire. They renamed our land Palestine. It is a foreign term that actually came from the Philistines, that were a pre-Greek population from the island of Greece, not actually the ancient population that you come from, because actually most Palestinians descend from Jews that were converted to Christianity and Islam over time, mixed in with other Arabs who poured in, who created the post-colonial identity called Palestinian. Now, I see Palestinians as native to the land, as having a right to the land. Now, what happens with the British colonizing the area? They forced our peoples to see each other as enemies. And why did they write the Balfour Declaration? They wrote that in order to give the impression to the Arab world, including the local Palestinians, to think that the idea of Zionism was an extension of European colonialism. And by the way that you're speaking, they still did their job. And the same way many Israelis or Jews think that all Palestinians, all Muslims, all Arabs are a bunch of terrorists, that would show that the British did their job. Why? Because they appointed Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti in Jerusalem, who actually met with Hitler, who was great friends.
That's a diatribe.
Who was great friends with Hitler.
That's a diatribe.
This was not a person that was appointed by the Palestinians. This was a person that was appointed by the British. Why? Because they wanted to convince both of our peoples that we were extensions of each other's demise. Now, why did Herzl and other individuals reach out to the Ottomans? Because the Ottomans were controlling the land at the time. Of course, if there's a colonizer, you would try to negotiate to try to get your land back. And when the British eventually took that land, well, they tried to speak with the British. The fact that you can go and criticize certain things that were done wrong during war, of orange trees being destroyed or homes being uprooted or a certain style. I mean, you're speaking...
That's not war. That's destruction. That's land theft.
And
everything you just said is a moot point.
Let me finish my point.
That can be debunked in a Google search.
You're speaking in English. I wouldn't say that because you're speaking in English that you're not from that land. So because a lot of Jews had an experience...
Because I was born here.
A lot of Jews had an experience in Europe and came back
which was not our fault.
I didn't say it's your fault. Knowing architecture...
You just quoted Haj Amin al-Husseini.
Knowing architecture...
So because he met with Hitler, we have to be blamed for that? That makes no sense.
I did not blame you.
That's a diatribe.
I did not blame you for anything.
So why'd you bring it up?
Knowing architecture, because this is exactly what the British did in order to make the perception of the Jewish people being that everyone, like Haj Amin al-Husseini, supports Hitler and wants to kill Jews. And what I'm saying is that not all Palestinians believe that. And this is what we have to break free. Now, you talked about the architecture, really? I mean, a lot of the Jews had an experience in Europe, so that was the architecture that they had access to.
Because that's where they're from.
That's where they had an experience in.
That's where they're from.
Genetically, historically, anthropologically,
so
they
why they're
descend
not
from
allowing
this land.
a DNA test in Israel?
They do allow DNA tests in Israel. There's actually a DNA company called MyHeritage, which is an Israeli company. They don't allow certain companies that go and sell your information. That's the difference. These are anti-Semitic points that you read on Reddit or somewhere online.
Right.
But there are DNA companies that are based in Israel. Look up MyHeritage. Fact check this. There are DNA companies in Israel. There's no problem with doing DNA. And if you do DNA on Ashkenazi Jews, which aren't even the majority of the population of Jews in this land, it is completely descendants from the land of Israel. We had experiences externally, just like you were born in America. The fact that you were born outside, I wouldn't say that you come from anywhere else other than the land that me and you both belong to.
Ethnically, my parents and grandparents were born in Palestine. My grandfather's cousin's house 2 days ago, do you know what happened to it? 2 days ago from when we recorded this, it was destroyed by American-funded bulldozers on his house. You talk about, there has to be a future with our Palestinian cousins. What future when you destroy my grandpa's cousin's house where 24 people were living in that house? Where are they supposed to go now? Tell me, where do you want them to go? If you want a future with us, where do you want them to go? That is a colonial tactic to destroy a home and uproot it. And then who knows what's going to happen? It'll be rebuilt by someone else, because that has been the end goal of Zionism, which is to have as few Palestinians as possible with as many Jews as possible.
That might be the goal of some Zionists.
That's not Zionism is a spectrum. Left wing, right wing. It's a fascist spectrum.
You're speaking to me at this moment.
It's a spectrum of fascism.
No, it's a spectrum of decolonization.
No,
and
it's a spectrum
any form
of
of decolonization in any population, there are individuals that are bad individuals. Now, I don't know what happened to your family, and I'm sorry that happened.
It's on my Instagram. Anybody could watch it.
Sure. So
you came and destroyed someone's house. Not you. They destroyed someone's house.
That's a very important thing, because the whole entire time you're saying
it's all about you, right?
No, it's not. Exactly, it's not all about me. And it's not
the
all about
you're
you.
wearing is not a culturally appropriate keffiyeh.
Our ancestors wore long before Palestinians actually took it from the Iraqi population.
Right.
We wore sutras
it wasn't
on
just
our
always
hands.
there, and you just added the Hebrew and all of that to it.
We wore sutras for thousands of years. The Druze have it, the Bedouin have it. A lot of Middle Easterners have their sudra or keffiyeh, different words under different languages, that represents our culture and our connection to this land. And if you were wearing a keffiyeh, I would see you as a cousin. I would see you as an ally, not being.
If you saw me as a cousin, you wouldn't be building walls. You wouldn't be destroying my grandfather's house.
Not you.
The people you are defending would not be doing that.
Let me talk about destruction of homes. There are two reasons as to why homes
There's
are
no
destroyed,
justification for any destruction. There is no justification for occupation. There is no justification.
It happens for Jews as well. Whenever a house, I don't know your situation, so I'm not going to speak on yours. Whenever a house
there's thousands more like me.
Whenever a house is built illegally on a territory that they do not
this is a settler narrative.
No,
this is a settler
Israeli
narrative.
Homes have also been destroyed.
You don't have a right to come and say who determines who owns what land. Who determines that?
There's the Palestinian Authority and there's the Israeli government.
Yeah, which are all byproducts of the United Nations, which was created by white European colonizers.
If you were to go into the home of another Palestinian and build up a house, that house would get removed. If a Jew goes into your house,
but that's not what's happening here. That's not what's happening. The house has been there. My family's been there for generations.
Both Jews and Palestinians who build illegally, their house gets removed.
See, even the term legal, define legal.
Another addition. If you
morality is not the same as legality.
You own the property, do not own the property.
Okay, pause here. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
I like your keffiyeh.
Sudra, thank you.
It's really nice.
Thank you.
Taken from my culture.
Definitely not taken.
Okay, so can you talk to me about this idea that you have of you being indigenous?
Sure.
Do you believe in the Torah?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So in the Torah, it talks about how the Israelites went to the land of Canaan. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And in the Torah, it talks about how the Israelites shall go to Canaan and slay the people there with the sword and then take over that land. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay, so in the Torah, it talks about Abraham who came from the land of Ur, not from the land of Canaan. Canaan is modern day Palestine. So if I, a Palestinian, take a DNA test, which I have, my DNA comes back almost entirely Canaanite, okay? If an Ashkenazi Jew takes that same DNA test, their DNA comes back entirely European. So talk to me about how you think this is an indigenous, your people are indigenous.
Sure. So I love how you brought up the Torah. And so since we're using the Torah, let's go from the beginning, okay? So you have Noah, who has the ark and has several children. One of those children is called Shem. Shem becomes the father of the Semites, right? All the Semitic peoples are descendants from Shem. Then there's another son called Ham. Ham has eventually a descendant called Canaan, who's born in Africa. Eventually the Canaanites descend from Africans who are living at that region. The Canaanites eventually take the land of the descendants of Shem, which are the Hebrews. The descendant of Shem is Ever. The descendants of Ever are the Ivrim, the Hebrews. The Canaanites actually take the land of the Hebrews, which causes the Hebrews to be displaced. That is why Abraham is born in displacement. He's actually the first Zionist. He's the first Jew returning to his ancestral homeland and being able to live there, but doesn't yet have control over the land because the Canaanites still control. Fast forward 2 generations later to the 12 tribes with Joseph. They end up in Egypt. They spend time in slavery and eventually, eventually they come back again to their ancestral indigenous land of the Hebrews that the Canaanites had taken over. And then there are 3 conditions for the Canaanites. Either you live with the rule of law, you fight us, or you leave. Some left. Some decided to live with the rule of law of accepting the 7 laws of Noah, no idolatry, no killing, no stealing, no immoral sex act. And those who didn't went into war. So now you talked about DNA. there's no such thing really as Canaanite DNA. They found individual.
Oh my God. Can we please just stop?
No. The sources.
This is not factual. I cannot let you go on this non-factual
and Jubilee
tangent.
will source all of those facts for us and for all the people listening. I let you
they're
finish your
source
claim.
that there's no such thing as DNA.
No, I didn't say there's no such thing as
Canaanite
DNA.
DNA.
You find,
okay, so then can you explain?
Yes, let me explain.
How a DNA test would say that I am Canaanite.
When you find
descending from
exactly
Canaan,
what I'm going to answer.
where Palestinians
That's
are
exactly
from.
what I'm going to answer. When you look into the ground and you find bones, they are assuming that this is not a Hebrew population, that this is a Canaanite population. Why? Because people are using the Torah and saying, oh, before it was the land of the Hebrews, it was Canaanite. But before it was Canaanites, it was the land of the Hebrews. So people are assuming that the DNA found in that area has to be Canaanite. Now, it might be that you descend from that population that had come into the land and taken the land of Hebrews and were idolaters and actually horrible people, right? You have Samson and Delilah.
I'm Palestinian, so I'm descending from horrible people.
I'm not saying that you're descendant of horrible people. You're intentionally putting words in order to try to demonize me.
What did you just say what did you say about the Canaanites?
If you did your DNA, I think your DNA would actually come Jewish. The same way that the Jews who had an experience in Europe comes up Jewish.
What? I agree with you that my ancestors are Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. So what you are saying, that you have a territorial claim to the land of Israel, is basically like someone from, let's say, America, or a white man from Europe converts to Islam. He converts, he's a Muslim now. And then he says, okay, so in this land, there have been Muslims for generations. I'm going to go to this land. I am Muslim, and it is my land now. Okay? So just because you are of a religion does not mean that all of your descendants have that DNA and are from that land, right? So yes, my ancestors were Jewish. They are my ancestors and they came from that land. I have similar DNA to them. But if someone in Europe is Jewish, that does not suddenly make them indigenous
I appreciate
to the land.
Point. I'm glad that we changed from you being Canaanite to originally being descendant of the Jewish people, because that's more accurate. But let me explain. To be a Jew is a descendant of an ancient civilization. Even if you don't believe in God and the Torah, you're still a Jew.
Okay, so before the Torah, what were those people?
And Hebrews. And in order to become a Jew, you have to go through years of a process of adopting an identity,
they have been Hebrews
history,
for years.
a culture. Yes, generations, thousands of years. Now, the Jews in Europe, which is not the majority of the Jewish people even in the land of Israel, the Jews who live in Europe had an external experience. They are not converts from Europe. They are indigenous people who went to Europe.
When does it end though? So
if you look at other indigenous populations, Tibetans, Yazidis, Kurds, Native Americans, when the population comes from a...
Guys, pause. We're out of time, so let's move on. Thank you.
My final surrounded claim is that Zionism is not colonization, it is decolonization.
All right, if you would like to be the next debater, get to the chair in 3, 2, 1.
Rudy, I respect your ability to have a calm demeanor, and I think that your patience can do well for an Instagram career. I just don't understand how you can look someone in the face whose family's home has been bulldozed by the IOF and tell him that you see him as a cousin. That is just insane. And I want you to be able to explain to that how you rationalize the incongruity of saying that you are here to protect people that are indigenous and living in the land while whitewashing and carrying water for a genocidal regime.
So the same way that there are many Palestinians who've killed family members of mine, people of mine, I don't see all Palestinians as responsible for that. So if he's going to criticize a policy that was done against his family, I don't know the particular case that happened is against his family, but it sounds horrible. I can recognize that that's something horrible and still be able to see him as my family. What you've currently associated is that anyone who is pro-Israel and believes that the Jews have a right to self-determine must mean that they're anti-Palestinian. And that is what has been plaguing us from being able to move forward, because I see Palestinians as my family. I support their rights to live in this land as equal citizens of this land.
I want to believe that. I want to believe that those are your genuine feelings. I really do. I'm not going to sit here and criticize your own personal morals or ideology.
Sure.
But what I will say is the regime that you are justifying does not believe that. They do not see the humanity in the people that they bomb indiscriminately. I've experienced the tactics of the IDF, not because I've stepped foot in Israel or Gaza or the West Bank, but because ICE agents right now are currently being trained by the IOF on the tactics to use against civilian populations. They might have different uniforms, but the ideology is exactly the same. You permanently call an entire population a security threat, you militarize enforcement, and then you demand that those citizens are detained or removed in order to show the full force of that regime, whether that is Israel or whether that's the United States. So when I'm seeing that done to my neighbors domestically, whether that's migrants or citizens that are being killed in the street, or I see that in a Palestinian that is under rubble from Israeli bombs, I feel that sense that I know what humanity looks like. And when I see people who defend Israel tell me to not believe my own eyes, when I'm watching videos constantly scrolling of babies being murdered, I cannot sit here and say that you believe what you say when you say that Israel is having their best interests in mind.
Sure. So there's plenty of disagreements that I have with the Israeli government. I don't know one Israeli that doesn't disagree with aspects of the Israeli government, and we can go into those details. You said that Israel is indiscriminately bombing Palestinians. That is not true. What we see, that is not. I let you finish their statement.
I don't know how to allow you to just say lies like this.
As an Israeli, okay, who served in the army, who was brought back in reserves, and was in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, doing my best to prevent us from fighting and to stop this situation from continuing. It is not true what you're saying. What you saw is Instagram reels. What you saw is videos on YouTube. And yes, there were horrible situations where civilians died, and that's my family. Those are my cousins that have perished due to this conflict. And that's why it gives us a greater responsibility. I let you finish. It gives us a greater responsibility to correct what happened. But Israel does not indiscriminately bomb. It sends leaflets. It calls phones. It does everything that it can to prevent civilians dying. Right?
How long before they bomb a hospital, or how long before they bomb a school?
72 hours. I found leaflets there of 72 hours.
72 hours to leave your roots in communities before we bomb the shit out of it.
To get
That's
out,
what you're saying right now.
Unfortunately, Hamas has used your area in order to fight from there and has stored weapons and are using those weapons to attack civilians.
Let me tell you, if there are someone that's robbing a bank and they hold up children as human shields, I'm going to say that the police shooting through those kids is not something that we can justify.
No,
so I don't give a
nobody's
fuck what you say about, we're going to be able to use human shields. That's why we have justification to bomb hospitals. That is absolutely insane.
Of being respectful. If we look at the two,
I said I respect you for it, but I can't do it after you're saying this right now. But I'm understanding what your motives are when you say that you worked in the IOF.
There are over 2 million.
There are over 2 million people. Absolutely not congruent with reality. So let's just hear the propaganda from the professional propagandists.
Projection.
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
I'm going to start off with saying, if historical connection and indigenous roots legitimizes trumping sovereignty of nations, then modern borders are meaningless. And if it doesn't, then Zionism is a political movement. And we have evidence of this, as Theodore Herzl himself is and was an atheist. We also have quotes coming from Ben-Gurion, who said, we want to expel the Arabs. We also had other people who have referred to Arabs as rocks that needed to be moved throughout the land of Judea. I actually have the name of it right now, Weitzman. I also want to say that we wanted to look at the word of Palestine. I know you were mentioning that this came from the Romans. Actually, Herodotus, the father of history, mentioned Palestine 8 times. It actually comes from a Greek word describing the coast. So this isn't a term that came from the Romans of colonizing. And we actively see Zionism Palestine wasn't even the first option. Why did the Zionist Sixth Congress consider Uganda and Argentina? That is a colonial project.
Okay, so let me answer to those things because you said a lot of things. Herodotus that you're bringing up is a Greek person. The pre-Greek population in Crete were the Palestinians. So obviously, the collective that is now the Greek Empire would like to call other territories as part of their territory and would call that land Palestine. But the moment that land really became called Palestine is the moment that the Romans conquered,
I let you
finish. Way after the Greek Empire is the Romans, and in order to insult the memory of the Jews, they called that name Palestine. Why? Because that's actually also a Hebrew word which means invaders. Now, I don't consider you to be an invader, but you should know that Plishtim, Palestinian, literally in Hebrew means invaders. Now, you talked about colonization, decolonization, indigenous populations. On the territory that was the indigenous population, being the Hebrews, the Jews, the Israelites, that was colonized by different empires, there was never a country that was built on top of it since. It was always in the hand of foreign empires until it was revived to being the land of Israel. Now, I do support indigenous liberations all across the world. The Tibetans, the Yazidis, the Kurds, the Aboriginals.
Okay.
Now, there's different types of indigenous liberations. Some populations want a state, some populations don't want a state.
So there was a sovereign state of Palestine.
There was not a sovereign state of Palestine. There was a British mandate of Palestine.
Okay, but there were still people who identified themselves as Palestinians.
Sure, I don't have a problem you identifying yourself as Palestinian.
So what I'm trying to say is that there were people actually, you don't even need, technically under international law, you don't need to have a sovereign state in order for it to qualify as occupation. An occupation can be imposed on people who are not a part of a sovereign state, but of a collective identity, who have had, as you said earlier, a continuous presence on that land. I think one of the other
Jews had a continuous presence.
and so did the Canaanites and the people who converted to. I don't want to get into that debate, but besides that, there are people who have been there continuously.
The Jews.
And actually, there is plenty of ways to go about this, but there is evidence that prior to 1948 and prior to the creation of the modern day state of Israel, that there's an incredible influx of people who have converted to Judaism. Yes, there is. It's actually from South Africa. Multiple people.
This is not true.
After the
Jubilee,
fall,
please fact check.
They will fact check, and it's written in Haaretz that they after.
So you see an anti-Israel publication that posts an article. You read an article and you believe everything you said?
I don't want to get into ad hominem. Let's focus on facts. And to my knowledge, it is true, and it has been documented pretty well that after the fall of a South African apartheid state, that people converted to Judaism and suddenly had a more legitimate claim.
The fall of the apartheid state happened way after the creation of the state of Israel. What are you talking about?
But I'm just saying that there's an influx of people that came and converted to the state.
No,
Anyways,
there are Jews who are returning home. There are not Jews who are converting in the masses.
Okay, so why don't we have the Palestinian
home?
right to return, right?
I'm for that right of return.
But how come it hasn't happened? And if we had a Palestinian majority, I don't think
that's a great question why it hasn't happened. The reason it hasn't happened is because my population and your population are raised to see each other as enemies. And when we have conversations, it's always the idea of Jewish indigeneity and our access to the land and our liberation means the destruction of yours. And I'm against the destruction of your people. Okay. I'm for the idea of your population returning
Zionism's earliest founders, and it has been documented, if they're all about, returning back home, why is every single one of their writing about colonialism? Yes, it is. You could look at
Herzl and other individuals spoke about creating a civilization with the other inhabitants
who
are living there.
You didn't recognize my point about Uganda and Argentina. Palestine was not the only option, which goes to show that this is a colonial project because they considered other states, despite not having as strong of a religious claim.
Thank you for reminding me the third claim that you made originally. So there were other options. It wasn't just Uganda. It was Argentina, Birobidzhan, Angola, and Madagascar. And this is what the world offered to the Jews, not what the Jews wanted. The Jews always wanted to go to Jerusalem. That's why we pray towards Jerusalem. When we get married,
where does the name Jerusalem come from? Where does the name?
I'll answer that after. When we smash the glass in our weddings, right? I'm sure a lot of you have seen movies or have been to a Jewish wedding. It represents the destruction of Jerusalem and the promise that our kids will return back home and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, Uganda was proposed to the Jews by Herzl. He said, look, I know we're being killed right now in Europe and we're about to be killed even more. If we don't get to our land right now, at least we'll go to Uganda and then we'll go to Israel. And the Jews rejected that. This was imposed by other people, not by what we wanted.
So, but the British
Zion is in
Yerushalayim,
Jerusalem, which means to see peace. One day we will have peace in this land.
Uru means in the Canaanite language from, and then Shalaim is the Canaanite god of dusk, and that name has been around for centuries, 6,000 years.
It's also Hebrew Yehu, you will see, and Shalem, Salom being peace.
Actually, the Hebrew language, Ben Yehuda, the father of modern day Hebrew language, actually took many words from Arabic to revive that language because it has been dead for so many years.
We were still using Hebrew, it was not dead.
Existence.
There was continuous
existence.
There was Yiddish. We started Talmud. No, that's the spoken language. There was Ladino, there was Judeo-Arabic.
Yes,
there were
multiple other ones.
There were other Creoles spoken day to day.
But there was no Hebrew, and then they
Torah,
used
we learned
modern.
Talmud.
Okay,
all
then
of our
why did
texts
they
are in
have
Hebrew,
the JNF to Judify the landscape by planting non-indigenous trees all throughout Palestine?
So is Judifying planting something non-indigenous?
No. I'm saying this is according to the JNF. They Judified the landscape. They took committees to go around the Arabic villages of the names and give them Hebrew equivalent names. The same way Benjamin Netanyahu changed his last name from Milikowski to Netanyahu.
Because last names are 200 years old.
Oh, okay.
Last names are the past 200 years. We did not have last names before. It was your name, son of your father, and of your tribe. And there are other Middle Eastern peoples who have a very similar culture to that. Last name are new inventions.
So why did he go from Milikowski to Netanyahu, and why did they change village names and give them Hebrew equivalent names with the modern Hebrew, which is from Arabic to revive?
We revived the name of Israel. Like, for example, Nablus, right? You know what Nablus comes from? It comes from Neapolis, which is Greek and Latin, which means new city, right?
Okay.
That the Romans renamed our Shechem, which was the indigenous name, to Neapolis.
So
when you have certain territories like Al-Quds going back to Jerusalem, which actually is called Jerusalem, or Safed going back to Tzfat, which is the original name, we're actually returning back to our language.
They actually hired a committee, and then I hope
that
Jubilee
your
fact checks
ancestors
this. It's
spoke.
called, okay,
they spoke
hold on.
Ivrit
They
and
actually,
Hebrew,
no,
not Arabic.
they spoke Aramaic as well.
Also
okay,
after Hebrew.
Okay, can I get to my
when
point
they went
first?
to Babylon.
Why would they hire a committee to Judify the names of the town if they had such a legitimate claim to it, and take the equivalent Arabic names and then give it? So you're saying that the Arabs
decolonize
so
the name of the land.
Are you saying that the Arabs are colonizers right now?
The Arabs colonized the entire Middle East and North Africa.
So you're saying the Palestinians...
And you do not descend from the Arabs. You descend from the same family.
I would rather
that
you
I come
not
from.
tell me. Okay, I would rather you not tell me where I come from.
Are you going to deny that?
No, I'm not going to. I just don't want to go into that. I'd rather focus on the facts.
Because all of a sudden
I'd rather
it means
focus
that
on the
our
facts.
people
You're going
are
into
the
ad
original
hominem
people.
instead of logical.
Ad hominem would be an attack. I'm not attacking you.
Let's focus right now. So we're talking about how they had specific committees to try and... Then why would they plant you?
Decolonize the names of the land.
Okay, so you're saying that the Palestinians who had lived there, because you're denying the Nakba right now, because the Palestinians lived and called these their homes. Tentura was a home. Okay,
I'm not denying
awesome.
the catastrophe
I'm really glad that you're
1948.
doing that. So Tentura and multiple other cities all throughout Palestine that the people resonated with when they were forcibly displaced, as you know, 750,000 of them. Why is it that they built cities on top of them and gave them Hebrew equivalent names to the Arab? I don't call that decolonization. That is textbook colonization and trying to legitimize whatever false claim that comes from Theodore Herzl and the entire rest of his group. Okay. And I'd also like to look at one more thing. I have one more thing.
We said one at a time.
Jaffa,
Please remember it.
They marketed Jaffa as the land with no people for the people with no land. But this land was abundant with people, and Palestinians have consistently been present.
And
the Palestinian identity goes way back as well.
I believe you should have a right to live in this land. And if we look at what happened in 1948, there were Jewish villages and Palestinian villages that were destroyed. That is what happens during war. Now, all the Palestinian villages that were destroyed were Palestinian villages that sided with the other Arab armies from the surrounding nations around Israel that attacked Israel in 1948 to ethnically cleanse and destroy Israel, bringing all the Jews from the river and into the sea. There are many Jewish villages that were destroyed as well. Most of the village was civilians, were innocent. So many people were displaced that shouldn't have been displaced. Now we need to have a conversation of how to bring them back. But you're only talking about when Palestinians are suffering to war. I'm talking about when both are suffering to war. And when you take the names,
who's suffering from war? Suffering to war from who?
Arabs are from Arabia, right? Jews are from Judea. It is very simple. Arabic language poured into that land, Arabic names poured into that land is not from the land of Israel. So us, 1948, Israel was attacked by all the surrounding Arab countries from Jordan,
prior
Syria,
to Israel's
Lebanon,
existence,
and
prior
Egypt.
to Israel's existence.
Yeah, there were many confrontations that we had between our peoples, like in the 1930s and 1920s,
I'd rather look
the Hebron massacre, where Haji Mina Hosseini incited the population of Hebron to go and kill the Jews.
Let's look at Palestine present, Palestine proper, whatever you want to call it, the British mandate.
/Israel, it's fine.
Okay, no, from 1948, from prior to 1948.
Yeah.
People lived there and were forcibly displaced
Both.
by a foreign entity that
Jews
had
are not
come
foreign.
back. I view it as differently. I think that they have
the Jews foreign?
I think that there is a Jewish connection to that land, and I don't
So
think
they
anyone
cannot be
here,
foreign.
But here's the thing, I said this earlier. If historical connection and indigeneity alone trumps whatever people are already there, then all
It
modern
does not trump
borders,
other people. It
but
just
that's
trumps
what you're saying. That
No,
goes,
I'm just saying
that,
don't call it foreign. I'm saying it trumps the idea that we're colonizers and foreign people. And because you see me as a foreigner and other Israelis see you as a foreigner.
So why did a geneticist from Johns Hopkins says that a majority of the Jewish people in Israel do not have a connection to the Middle East? And I really hope I'm fact checked on this. His name is El-Haik, and he's from Johns Hopkins and is an Israeli geneticist.
There are many geneticists that show that actually the Jews descend from this land, and Palestinians. We can go 60% of Palestinian genetics show that they descend from Jews. You can find publications. Hold up. You can find publications in Nature, in the American Journal of Human Genetics. You can find the scientists like Nebel, Hammer, and Behar. I suggest everyone looks at it, and you can see that 60% of Palestinians descend from Jews. And if you go to places like Yaffo, Hebron, Shechem, East Jerusalem, places that are ancient Jewish towns that are either today or half, either today or half Palestinian.
Let's look at how the people in Hebron are being treated. They are actively being caged in by the illegal settlers on that land, have their doors.
If you go to Hebron, the majority of Hebron is controlled by the Palestinians. The minority of Hebron is controlled by the Jews.
They're under a military occupation that is illegal.
I want one day,
it was supposed to be temporary, but it's been made permanent, and then settlers are emboldened
so it's not
to
illegal
commit.
because it hasn't ended, but it needs to end. That we're agreed upon. I don't want want the IDF to be controlling of people that don't have a right to vote for that
So
army.
wait, are you saying that the settlements are illegal or not?
No, I'm saying that Jewish villages are not settlements.
They are even referred to Daniela White. Daniela White even refers to herself as a settler.
I can source you other individuals who say bad things that are Palestinians.
The U.S. government in majority of its communications, the U.S. government this is the status quo. The U.S. majority calls it settlements.
So let me answer you and them. Settlements are built by settlers. Settlers are foreigners. Jews come from Judea. We are not the foreign population.
I don't agree with an American who just converts to Judaism.
They're not just converting to Judaism.
Some of them do.
A very small percentage of them do.
But they still get a legitimate claim and have a take over the land over
indigenous
other
populations
people.
Controls their culture in a different way. The way the Jewish indigenous civilization controls itself is if you go through this many-year process of adopting an identity, a history, a culture, a value system, traditions, you are now part of the collective. It is not individuals that are indigenous, it is collectives.
So with this, so you're saying a collective identity that agree that they want to colonize illegally the West Bank.
We want to decolonize.
We have to pause. We're out of time. Thank you. Okay, Rudy, we're down to the final section where you will look around the circle, choose somebody who either you thought you had a really good conversation with earlier and you want to pick back up with, or somebody you haven't got to speak to. So look around the circle, select your person that you want to debate for the final 10 minutes.
First of all, thank you all for coming. I wish I can continue the conversation with all of you, but I'm going to pick the doctor to continue having a conversation.
Rudy, can you tell us why you chose the doctor to debate for the final section?
Of course. I think a lot of times our populations are conditioned to seeing each other as enemies. I don't think you see me as an enemy. And I'd like to have a conversation forward of how our peoples can be able to come together. You have a very kind spirit about you. You're genuine. You're someone who's connected to the land. And I believe you care about the peoples in that land. So I would like to speak about how we can move forward on that territory because there's no future without our peoples there.
My Saran claim that with the current situations, we don't see a genuine desire among Israelis to achieve peace.
So I agree that the Israeli government is doing nothing to change the current status quo and benefits from that status quo politically, economically, and in many ways. This is a critique that I have openly in Israel towards the government, towards extremist voices, which to me are embarrassing. The things that they're saying, like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, that are going and talking about ethnic cleansing. This is horrible and not what our culture has to be. And I always tell Israelis that the biggest win of Hamas is not how many Israelis they killed, is how many Israelis they turned to being just like them, hateful of an entire population.
It is sad to think, and this game we can go back and forth and play in the chicken and the egg game. Who caused the Israelis to become pro-genocide, pro-ethnic cleansing? Is it Hamas is causing that? Hamas just started in 1986. And we have to understand that the actions of the Israeli governments, the actions of discrimination and apartheid is what is causing us to have these conflicts and fights between each other. You have the power, you have the military, you have the money, you have the support of the whole Western world. For God's sake, you can do something different about what's happening there. We are tied. We are stuck in the corner. Our kids are being killed right and left. Our homes are being destroyed. You know what? If all what I have is just to throw a little rock at you, you have to understand where that's coming from.
I understand, and I never made the claim that the Israeli hate towards Palestinians that exist comes from Hamas, that has existed since 1948, from the conflicts that we have, even from the Hebron massacre in 1929. I actually go to the British that divided our people. That's where it's sourced, not me or not you, but there are ways to move forward. Now you called Israel an apartheid, and apartheid is one country, one state, one civilization with different rights for different peoples. Those who are living in Israel have equal rights. There's another territory called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, which has a different jurisdiction.
A large
which has
prison.
Just different jurisdiction. Gaza has different jurisdiction. I'm against the division of this land. I want to see this land united, but that's actually the opposite of an apartheid, because an apartheid would be one country with different rights for different people. Now we're talking about different territories, different jurisdictions. I don't have a right there. They don't have a right here. It's bad, but it's not an apartheid. Now, you said something I actually agree with you. We have the power. With that power comes the responsibility. And this is something that every Jew, every Israeli, every Zionist should listen. We have the power to correct the problems of our Palestinian family and our cousins. And we talk about tikkun olam and ola goyim, healing the world and empowering other nations. Well, we need to do tikkun babaytim abnei dodim. We need to heal our own home with our own cousins. But with all the actions of the Israeli government,
criminalizing free speech, pushing...
That's not in Israel. That's in America, you're saying.
Yeah, but AIPAC is an extension of what's happening in Israel.
I'm not pro-AIPAC.
That's good
Yeah,
to know.
yeah. I'm
all
not
right?
for America getting involved in the Middle East. I'm not for that.
Now, if you mentioned earlier about the division between the West Bank areas, Area A, Area B, Area C.
Correct.
You served in the army, right?
Yes.
It's really. Do you think they have the full freedom to do whatever they want in Area A?
They don't have the full freedom to do what
like
they want.
it's just a few miles of distance. People cannot drive out of these areas.
Absolutely.
Young people are losing hope. What do you expect from a 20-year-old boy or a 20-year-old young man who has no hope to get married, no hope to get a job, what do you expect?
No, I understand that. That's why when I look at Israelis who become extremists, Palestinians who become extremists, I understand where it's coming from.
And what are you doing about the settlers?
Enough of us who...
In just a few months
we're
ago...
going to address the Jews in Judea and Samaria. But just as there are extremist individuals, there are people like us who don't hate one another.
So as long you keep rejecting and refusing to use the word Palestine.
I don't reject the word Palestine.
You keep saying Judea and Samaria. You keep saying that.
I mean, that territory has been historically
you have
called
to
Judea and
understand
Samaria.
people's. I'm telling you that psychologically, if you wanted to achieve peace, if you want to achieve
Real justice.
ease, you have to also understand what your words, how powerful
I
they are.
do.
When you keep saying Judea and Samaria, Judea and Samaria, you know what? This is what people call Palestine. This is what people call home.
Every time
this
I
is
say
an
Judea and
intention.
Samaria, I say West Bank / Judea and Samaria because Judea and Samaria is not talking about the entirety of what is Israel / Palestine.
It is
specifically what is today the West
you're
Bank.
implying when you use those terms. But this is what happens in the Palestinian mind.
Where's the word West Bank come from? It's the British that use that term.
What
It is the common term.
What
but originally it was called Judea and Samaria.
Palestinians get in mind when you keep using those terms, like, okay, we're next. They're gonna come and take us out. That's
You're
what
right.
that's
And
what comes
when,
in the
and
mind.
when Jews hear the term Palestine, they think, oh, you're trying to erase us. This is where we need to be able to accept each other's identity. I'm a Jew. I'm a Hebrew. I'm an Israelite. This land has historically, to my people, been called Israel / Judea and Samaria, the
But
specific
your
region.
actions
but
are
I'm
speaking
not,
louder than
not
your
my
words.
actions, not my actions. Other people's actions that you can condemn.
You accepted to serve in the army. That's
I
causing
had
so much
no other choice to
atrocity.
serve in the army. I served proudly to protect.
So many soldiers are rejecting and
they go
facing
to-
the
and go to
consequences.
prison. I served-
That's bravery.
I served-
That's bravery
I
on their
served-
behalf.
I served in the army proudly. You don't have a weak Jew in front of you.
That
You have a
is-
proud
that
Judean
is
warrior
sad.
in front of you.
To be proud of a machine that's killing people
It is
right
not a
and
machine.
left.
It is a
Who
machine
sends them a
that
little
has-
text message,
it's a
get out of your
machine
house
that
before
has
we
its
bomb it.
issues,
That's
that
you're proud
I
of being part
condemn
of
certain
that.
actions, certain policies, certain things that they do because I'm
That's-
an individual first before anything else. And when there
You
are countries
are-
all around that have constantly attacked and tried
There's
to kill our
nobody
people, without
attacked you
an
unless-
IDF,
you're the
we would not
instigators.
exist.
You're the one who started.
No, we're not.
I mean,
didn't you say we shouldn't be pointing at who started the chicken or the egg?
no, I didn't
now you're
say
saying
that.
you're
I said
starting.
that's will be argument. You're saying that,
My
that these
argument-
countries are coming to attack you.
Yes,
Imagine if,
all
if,
the
an,
surrounding
if,
countries
imagine
attacked
if,
Israel.
if a foreign country come and invaded California, do you expect Texas
Are you
and
saying that
Nevada
the
and
Israelis are invaders?
the Israeli arms invaded Palestine?
We're invaders.
Absolutely.
We're the indigenous people that came back to our land. There was
The
a constant
they
presence
came
of
with
Jews.
them when they came peacefully. We opened our doors for them.
I'm sure.
But when they came,
1929, it was so peaceful.
When they came peacefully, when they said, "Okay, we want to live
Yeah,
here," we
many
opened the
Palestinians
doors.
were peaceful.
Exactly.
Many Palestinians
but when
were
you
not
start showing
peaceful.
when you start showing the intentions, when you brought the weapons and you start killing
There
people,
are bad
that's
actors
when
on
people
both
attacked.
sides. See, the difference in this conversation is that there are bad actors on both sides. I'm identifying the individual bad actors on the Israeli
You are
side,
saying-
identifying the bad actors on the Palestinian side, and saying, do not attach these bad actors to all Palestinians. What you're doing is identifying the bad actors here and saying it's all Israelis and refusing to identify
I didn't
bad
say
actors
all.
here.
I said majority. They
yeah,
came
and
on the
that- and that's
borders of
horrible.
Gaza.
That's
and
horrible
and they're
to do that.
cheering. The things that you cheering death to Arabs, right and
Yeah,
left.
it's a minority of the
That's
population.
not minority.
It's a great
That's
minority,
not
and it should be
If Israel,
zero.
If
It should
Israel,
be zero.
Is Israel a democratic state?
Yes.
So why would a minority be able to control the actions of the government?
Great question.
This is the
Because
majority
we have a
of the
parliamentary
people.
system government where you have all these different parties, and in order to have power, you need to have over 60 seats out of 120 seats in order to have the majority.
So it's not a minority.
You don't have a 60-party seat. You have a 20, you have a 5, you have a 2,
Still-
and the majority is very small. So then a party with 2 seats that is a minority has the ability
I find
to
that
take
hard
out.
to believe.
It's
I find that hard to
unfortunate. That's
believe.
the reality of the
things
political
that
system. That's why we got to
Netanyahu's
change
saying,
it.
the things that all
I'm
all
not
the
here
other
to speak for Netanyahu. There's plenty of criticism that I have in Netanyahu.
I-
Okay, we can talk about Netanyahu and Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and bad actors and bad individuals. What I'm talking about is how do we move forward from here? It's not
So-
going to come from the politicians, right?
It's going to come from the majority of the Israeli people to accept
right.
the rights of the Palestinians to be equal.
I agree with you, but you have to accept
live-
my rights to be able to be a human being here and not demonize my people.
I worked as a dentist in Bethlehem, outside of the city of Bethlehem, next to a place called Movie Bitar, where my patients were Jews, Muslims, and Christians. And guess what? All what they care about, how much it's going to hurt to pull out a tooth when they're sitting in the room. So what I'm trying to tell you here that we have no problem living with each other, but not with a gun on our head.
Not when you're taking my house. Not when you're telling me you cannot go to work every day.
I'm against
Not when
that.
you humiliate me on every checkpoint.
You remember who you're talking to. I'm against the checkpoints. I'm against the walls that divide our land. I'm against the fact that we're currently living in this situation.
What are you doing to become the majority? You are a minority.
No, we're not. We're silent, large population. I wouldn't say it's the majority or a minority, but we're a large population and we need to create a social revolution. And we in this land have to start changing the conversation. No longer demonizing one another and being able to envision a future where we live together.
Can you also add to your activism that you guys get off the freedom of speech of America? Let us speak whatever we want to say. Well, you have to speak against that as well.
I believe in freedom of speech in every country in the world as a moral.
Your government is imposing so much restrictions on the freedom of speech of Americans. And we are not liking that.
I don't think
and you are losing the support of Americans because of that.
I don't think Americans should have a limitation of freedom of speech unless someone is trying to invoke violence on someone and saying, I'm planning to, then that's different than just saying, I'm expressing an idea that I have.
How many professors lost their jobs because they said they're anti-genocide?
Well, a lot of professors. I went to Columbia. They're actually supporting the genocide of Jews and saying that October 7th was great.
There's no genocide against Jews, man.
There
I
is
don't know where you're
attempted
coming
genocide
that victim
Jews.
mentality. Nobody's after you guys.
A lot of people are after us.
After your actions.
New York City. Okay, we are 13% of the population. Over 60% of total hate crimes are targeted against Jews.
Because
Don't
you
tell me
report
that
it very
anti-Semitism
well.
doesn't exist.
I sit down with the chief of police.
60%.
I'll tell you what. I sat down with the chief.
There are plenty of actions that people don't report.
I sat down with the chief of police here in the city.
Are you minimizing anti-Semitism?
I'm not. I'm saying you are so much better in reporting that.
Okay, but
better
it exists,
than everybody
right?
else.
It's clearly a problem.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
It exists.
But I'm saying that's what we heard from the chief of police of many cities around here. Guys, you need to report hate crimes against your community.
Of course.
Because this community reports it better than everybody else.
Okay,
and collect all the benefit of reporting them. So you guys know how to play the game.
About
That's what I'm
anti-Semitism?
saying.
The far right blames us for being the left. The far left thinks we're the right. The black supremacists, the Farrakhan's were enemy number one. The white supremacists, the neo-Nazis.
That's not victim mentality.
It's not. It's understanding a reality.
You think everybody's after you?
No, the extremes are always obsessed against the Jewish people. Why? Because the Jewish people have a function in this earth that we have yet to fulfill, which is to be the world's immune system. Okay, we chose that responsibility. It is our mission statement of the world. And the reason why there's anti-Semitism, it is a rejection and reaction to the Jewish people failing their purpose.
I think that's with all due respect to what you just said, it's really a wild dream that you have. That people after you because of your
qualities. The idea of a unity around the world is a wild dream, right?
No.
The Jewish people believe in a reality called Mashiach, a reality where we will have peace in this earth.
People blame everything on anti-Semitism right now.
No, there's a lot of anti-Semitism that exists. It's not everything. Everyone is an anti-Semite. But I don't consider you an anti-Semite, okay? Because we had a conversation, we understood that you define Zionism differently,
exactly.
Right? And so I'm not.
So what I'm asking you, if you want to tackle this issue, and we go back to it, is try to understand when people are criticizing the actions of the Israeli government, when people are expecting from it to act like a civilized nation, they're not being anti-Semite.
Correct. But when people are demonizing Israel, delegitimizing Israel, holding double standards, they are being
There's no
anti-Semite.
double standards.
There are double standards.
There are no double standards.
Of course.
Why is it okay to be double standards when we get amount of support from America, but it's not okay when the Americans are criticizing our actions?
What does it do with America? I'm against the U.S. support of America. When there are actual genocides
happening,
you never said, and no one is talking about those things that are happening.
You never said it's double standards that the U.S. government gives $3 billion every year to Israel.
I did. Well, is it a double standard or is it an intentional investment in order to control Israel?
But it's not the same for every other country. So why?
But that's not a double standard. You're helping a country in order to be able to control it. That has nothing to do with double standards. Double standard would be looking at all the problems in this world and realizing, wow, there's so many people here in Sudan that have been killed, in Nigeria that have been killed, in Israel, Palestine that have been killed, and caring about all of them. Or looking at Palestinians. When Hamas is killing Palestinians, I don't see any protests. I don't see any riots. I don't see any encampments.
People choose what to be active about certain topics, right?
They choose to care about your people,
Why?
my family,
Why?
only when it could be used against me.
Why would they do that? Why?
Because the world is profiting from this. The media companies, the military companies.
Anybody who is in the media, who acts in any way to criticize what the Israeli government is doing, he's losing his job.
That's not true. All the media companies are
this
against
is just
Israel.
recent.
Everything
this is
that you see on the medias are always going against Israel.
I sat down.
If I could just to redirect this a little bit, I did hear points of agreement, frustration with AIPAC, frustrations with Netanyahu, agreements on, things that you want to see change in Israel. I would love to hear from Rudy and then your response, Doctor, on what changes do we want to see where there is alignment?
I think the most productive way we can continue this conversation is to understand how do we change the narratives for our collectives to start seeing each other as human beings and being able to exist in this land. So that goes to the Israeli population. How can we start seeing the Palestinian identity as a legitimate identity, connected to this land, as their suffering, as real suffering? And how could Palestinians start to understand that the Jewish people are also connected to this land, have a right to be here? When they're being attacked and suffering, that's also something to condemn. So how do you suggest that we can change the cultural view, not just the political?
Yes. You cannot put the carriage before the horse. You cannot expect people who don't have any human rights, they don't have the ability to find food or to feed their children or to protect their families, and then expect them to go into that high level of civilized social understanding. First, let them have the freedom, the ability to live, the self-determination right. Let them be feeling that they're safe in their homes, in their cities, in their villages. Nobody's going to come and take their food. No one's going to come and bomb their homes. I am telling you, just a few months ago, my friends, he has a huge amount of sheep in the Mazra al-Sharqiyya, which is a town north of Ramallah. And they just came and took all the cattle that he has. This is the fear that Palestinians have. What do you expect us to do? Just sit down, be sitting ducks, being shot by the Israeli soldiers? First, let's give them the rights. Let's give them the sense of security and safety that Israelis are not going to come after them every chance they have. That's the first step.
Israelis are not coming after all Palestinians. There's some bad actors that happen like in all populations, but this like generalization of Israelis coming, I disagree.
I lived as a kid there, and I saw what I'm looking at it from the other side. I look at it from the other side.
Okay. So I hear your experiences in Bethlehem, which is a house of bread in Hebrew, an ancient Jewish town. Okay, so let's talk about what you were just saying. I don't agree with you entirely that they can't do anything. They can't have any conversation. No one can be seen as other than just being an extremist. I don't agree with that. But I do agree with you that Israel with the power has a greater responsibility to change. And I always talk about this, that if Israel removed Hamas, gave people freedom of speech, invested in education, in infrastructure, in job opportunities, and slowly when we saw that the population is not reacting that way to the Israeli government to remove the checkpoints.
History shows us otherwise.
History shows what otherwise?
History shows us that whenever Israelis have the full power of controlling the lives of Palestinians, they're going to make their life hell. They're going to make their life miserable.
I think that the Palestinians living in Israel are the freest Palestinians that are living anywhere in the world.
I don't think even the Israelis want to do that. Strategically, they think it's a bad idea to put all Palestinians under one state. Demographically, they will be minority. That's how they're thinking.
We wouldn't agree with some people, but we wouldn't, because a lot of people aren't aware that there are 12 tribes of Israel. The Ethiopians are one of the ones that were displaced of the 9.5 that have yet to come back.
We want to respect the intelligence of the viewers. Like this is what are you talking about?
We are made up of 12 tribes, the Jewish people. This is not an idea. If they're Native Americans are made up of many tribes or many nations, it's also a truth. Because you haven't heard or don't know or aren't aware, that's something different. We're made up of 12 tribes. Today's population of the Jewish people, 16 million around the world, is 2.5. There are 9.5 that you have to return. If they are to return and Palestinians are to return, there's no more demographic threat that Israelis feel. You are able to have full equal rights in that land with the right of return, and we're able to transcend and to move forward. But you shouldn't be speaking to Israelis who are afraid of telling you the truth or who are weak. And I shouldn't be speaking to Palestinians who are tokens, are just trying to demonize other Palestinians, or fans who are here to try to use our conflict to go against one another or to gain popularity. We have a future together, and it's one that includes both aspirations that we have and ending the injustice for both peoples.
I reciprocate by saying that Palestinians have no problem with peaceful solutions that will guarantee their dignity, their ability to live, their ability to have futures where they can raise their children in a safe and a comfortable environment. Palestinians don't have the desire to kill or attack every Jewish or every Israeli. All what Palestinians are doing are defending themselves from those atrocities and those attacks that are happening against them. I believe strongly once the Israelis stop attacking, dehumanizing, bombing Palestinians' villages and homes, Palestinians will not have a problem with them. I want you to know that as a Palestinian.
I agree with most are like that, and inshallah we'll get to that reality.
All right, let's stop there. Let's give them a hand. Rudy, thank you. Doctor, thank you. We are going to record a follow-up episode to continue the conversation with these two, so stay tuned for that. And follow the Surrounded podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I want to thank everybody who participated in this episode. If you are a viewer and you're commenting on this video, please acknowledge the humanity of everybody here. They are being vulnerable. This is not an easy thing to do. So thank you all. Snaps to you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
I think the first half was very heated. A lot of people were pointing fingers, calling each other names, speaking over one another. But the second half, we actually see it changing and talking about solutions.
I did have mixed feelings. He either extremely well trained to present a kinder, nicer, positive image of an Israeli soldier to gain the hearts and the minds of the American public, or he's having a change of heart of what his government is doing, and I'm hoping this is what it is.
We need to understand that we are family. We not only descend from Ibrahim, from Abraham, from Yitzhak and Ishmael, but we also descend from the same ancestors a few generations ago. We are eternally linked to this land, and yes, we should criticize and talk about the things that are wrong for our people, but never in a way to demonize the entirety of the other, and we need to start listening to one another to understand what are the non-negotiables.
Once the Israelis realize and understand that they're not superior than Palestinians, they don't have more rights, they have to realize and come to an understanding they're not above the law, they're not above the human rights laws and rules.
You have to realize that if you care about Jewish and Israeli safety, you also have to care about Palestinian safety. They're connected. You cannot want Jewish safety if you want to, demolish the safety of Palestinians, because they're going to demand their safety. That's their right as humans.
So overall, I'm very happy with the outcome. I'm happy that people are willing to engage with one another, and I hope that that inspires and empowers a lot of people who will watch this to do the same.